Step aside, ma'am. You're not boarding this flight." The hand came up fast, palm flat, arm extended across the jet bridge entrance like a toll gate. The man behind it wore a navy blazer with the airline's gold wings pinned above his breast pocket, and his expression carried the particular confidence of someone who had already decided how this would end. The boarding pass scanner had beeped green. The screen had flashed, confirmed, and still his arm didn't move. 300 passengers sat in the gate area behind her. Every one of them had just watched a black woman in a wrinkled gray hoodie and running shoes get stopped at the entrance to first class, while the man in the business suit who'd scanned his pass 4 seconds earlier walked through without a word. She didn't know it yet, but the airline had just chosen the worst possible person to humiliate in public. Because the tote bag hanging from her shoulder contained page 47 of a 312-page acquisition agreement, signed that morning, worth $120 million, and her name was on it. But that comes later. Right now, all anyone saw was a tired woman being told she didn't belong. The internal security log would become evidence. It read, timestamp, 4:47 p.m. Mountain Time, flag code, FAREA, UDIT Gach Noi, MANUAL. Origin, Agent Workstation, DEN Gach Noi, B Bon Bay, Gach Noi, Honghai. The flag had been placed 6 minutes before she reached the podium, 6 minutes before anyone scanned her ticket, 6 minutes before there was any reason at all, to question whether seat Ba A belonged to her. Someone had flagged her before she even arrived. The scanner beeped green. Her ticket was valid. The arm across the jet bridge didn't move. If this story already has your attention, and trust me, what happens next will make your jaw drop, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. You don't want to miss a single second of what's coming. 12 hours earlier, Sable Merritt had been asleep on a leather couch in a conference room on the 37th floor of a downtown Denver law firm. Not the kind of sleep that rests. The kind that happens when the body simply quits after 14 hours of negotiations, red line markups, and 3 rounds of counteroffers that nearly killed a deal worth 9 figures. She'd woken at 5:12 a.m. to the sound of her own phone alarm, face creased from the couch cushion, neck stiff, still wearing yesterday's blouse under the blazer she'd draped over herself like a blanket. The conference table was littered with coffee cups, crumpled napkins, and 4 copies of a purchase agreement thick enough to stop a door. The signing had happened at 9. 3 counterparties, 2 sets of outside counsel, a wire transfer authorization that required 4 separate approvals. Sable had stood at the head of the table and watched each signatory turn to page 47, sign on the designated line, and slide the document to the next. Her name went last. Managing Director, Vanguard Peak Capital. The deal she'd spent 9 months building, from first pitch to final close. $120 million. A mid-market industrial automation company acquired, restructured, positioned for growth. The kind of deal that didn't make headlines outside of trade publications, but moved real money and employed real people and required the kind of operational intelligence that couldn't be faked. By noon, the celebration was over. Handshakes, a single glass of champagne she barely touched, a round of congratulatory emails she'd answer on the plane. Her flight to New York left at 5:20 p.m. She'd have 3 hours to shower, change, pack, or she could skip all of that, throw on the travel clothes she kept in her office, and get to the airport early enough to sit in the lounge and breathe for the first time in 2 weeks. She chose breathing. The hoodie was soft, dark gray, no logo. Leggings, running shoes. The good ones, broken in from actual runs, not fashion. Her tote bag was the only thing that didn't match the outfit. Structured leather, waterproof interior sleeve holding the executed acquisition agreement in a clear document protector, phone charger in the left pocket, passport in the right. Everything in its place. Everything positioned so she could reach it without looking, the way someone organizes a go bag when seconds might matter. The document protector was labeled with a red sticker reading Original, Do Not Copy, and beneath it, a waterproof pouch containing 3 USB drives, each holding encrypted backup copies of the closing files. Redundancy wasn't paranoia. It was the habit of someone who'd learned that critical documents had a way of disappearing when they became inconvenient. She didn't think about how she looked. She thought about legroom and silence, and the fact that she hadn't slept more than 4 hours in 3 days. The rideshare to Denver International took 38 minutes. The driver played country music at a volume that discouraged conversation, which suited Sable perfectly. She sat in the back seat, watching the plains east of the city flatten out toward the airport's white-peaked terminal, the tent-like roof designed to echo the Rocky Mountains rising behind them. At the TSA pre-check line, the agent, a heavy-set man with a mustache that hadn't been in fashion since the 90s, glanced at her boarding pass, then at her face, then at the pass again, held it up to the light like he was checking for a watermark on currency. "Is this your ticket?" The businessman ahead of her, white, gray suit, leather briefcase, had handed over an identical boarding pass 30 seconds earlier. The agent had waved him through without a second glance. "Yes," Sable said. No inflection, no explanation. She'd learned years ago that explaining invited more questions, and more questions invited more suspicion, and more suspicion invited the kind of attention that turned a routine afternoon into a federal complaint. The agent studied the pass for another 3 seconds, then waved her through. 3 seconds didn't sound like much, but 3 seconds of silent scrutiny, multiplied by every checkpoint in every airport in every year of her adult life, added up to something heavier than any carry-on. She collected her bag from the belt, walked to the Centurion Lounge on Concourse B. The receptionist, young, blonde, professional smile that flickered when she saw the hoodie, scanned Sable's membership card and frowned. "1 moment, please." The moment stretched. The receptionist scanned the card again, picked up a phone, spoke quietly to someone, her hand cupped over the receiver as though the words needed hiding. Sable stood at the entrance holding her tote bag, watching 3 other travelers breeze past the desk with nothing more than a card tap and a nod. A white couple in matching athleisure. A man in a rumpled button-down carrying a fast food bag. None stopped. None questioned. None asked to wait. A manager appeared, scanned the card a 3rd time, looked at Sable over the top of his glasses with the particular expression of someone verifying that reality matched his expectations, and finding that it didn't. "Everything checks out. Apologies for the delay." No explanation for what had caused the delay. No acknowledgement that no one else had been delayed. Just a smile and a gesture toward the lounge interior, as if the previous 90 seconds of quiet interrogation had been perfectly normal. Sable walked in, found a seat in the corner, back to the wall, facing the entrance. The choice was automatic. She didn't think about it, the way a person doesn't think about putting on a seatbelt. She set her tote bag on the chair beside her, document sleeve accessible, phone in the outer pocket, the bag's handles looped once around the chair arm so it couldn't be snatched. She scanned the room. 2 exits, one behind the bar, one through the main entrance. Bathrooms to the left. Emergency exit sign glowing green above a door marked staff only. She opened her notes app and typed Bazo Bonmui Hai Fuchio, Centurion Lounge, Den Concourse B, card scanned Balin, manager called. No explanation given. 3 other passengers, non-black, entered during wait. None stopped. She typed it the way someone fills out an incident report. Clinical, time-stamped, factual. Not the first time she'd made this kind of entry. Not the 10th. Not the 20th. The Notes app on her phone held 2 years of entries like this. A quiet archive of moments that individually meant nothing and collectively meant everything. In the lounge, a woman in cream cashmere and gold jewelry held court near the window. Mid-50s, platinum blonde, the kind of tan that came from vacations rather than work. She was talking to 2 men in suits about her diamond medallion status and the last-minute upgrade she'd secured for the New York flight. Her laugh came in short, bright bursts that punctuated her stories like exclamation points, and her voice carried the effortless volume of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. Her name was Margot Langford. Sable didn't know that yet, but she noticed the look, the quick up-and-down assessment when Sable walked past on the way to her corner seat, the slight tightening around the mouth, the way Margot's gaze lingered on the hoodie and sneakers before dismissing their owner entirely. The look lasted less than 2 seconds. It said, "You don't belong here." It said, I've decided who you are and what you're worth, and the answer to both is nothing. Sable had been dismissed by experts. She sat down and opened her email. 14 unread messages. Subject lines scrolling past. Keating execution copy. Wire confirmation. Tranche mote. Final closing docs. Countersigned. Board notification. Acquisition complete. The digital debris of a 9-figure morning, reduced to a phone screen in an airport lounge. She didn't respond to any of them. She closed her eyes instead. Just for a minute, just long enough to feel the tension in her shoulders begin to loosen, the adrenaline of the past 72 hours finally starting to ebb. Her phone buzzed. A text from a contact saved as L. Okafor, congratulations on closing. Call me when you land. Board wants a debrief Monday. Also, PR is drafting the press release. Your name and photo, front page of the trade journals. You earned it. Sable read the message. Didn't reply. Closed her eyes again. When she opened them 4 minutes later, Margot Langford was standing 3 feet away, speaking to one of the suited men in a voice that was not quite directed at Sable, but not quite directed away from her either. I just think it's interesting who they let in here now. I mean, I've been a platinum member for 11 years. 11 years, and you used to know everyone in the lounge. It was like a club. She paused. Let the word land. Club. The kind with memberships and exclusion as a feature, not a bug. Now it's different. The suited man glanced at Sable in a way, uncomfortable but unwilling to challenge. Margot continued, louder now, performing for an audience that included everyone within earshot. I saw someone in here last month in sweatpants. Sweatpants. Can you imagine? I mean, if you're going to be in a premium space, at least make an effort. Sable did not look up, did not engage, did not give Margot the satisfaction of a reaction that could be weaponized. She scrolled through emails on her phone with the disciplined calm of someone who had spent 2 decades learning that silence was more dangerous than anger, because silence couldn't be quoted, couldn't be twisted, couldn't be used as evidence that you were the aggressor. Margot waited for a response that didn't come. The silence seemed to offend her more than any words could have. She took a step closer, close enough that her perfume invaded Sable's space, something expensive and floral and aggressive, and lowered her voice to the stage whisper that certain people use when they want to be overheard while appearing to be discreet. I'm just saying, when I see someone who doesn't quite fit in a place like this, I think it's responsible to mention it, for everyone's comfort. Sable looked up from her phone, not quickly, slowly, with the deliberate pace of someone choosing their moment. She met Margot's eyes and held them, said nothing, just held the gaze long enough for the silence to become a pressure, for Margot to feel the weight of being looked at the way she'd been looking at others. 4 seconds. 5. 6. Margot's smile faltered. She took half a step back. Instinctive, the retreat of someone who had expected to be the predator and suddenly wasn't sure what was looking back at her. Well? Margot adjusted her cashmere wrap. I was only trying to be friendly. She returned to her circle of suits and Prosecco, and for the next 20 minutes, Sable could hear her voice carrying across the lounge. Louder now, more animated, telling stories that didn't include what had just happened, performing normalcy with the desperate energy of someone who'd been unnerved by 6 seconds of silent eye contact from a woman in a hoodie. Sable returned to her phone, typed in her notes app, Bonjour, muitam fuccio, Centurion Lounge. Same passenger from earlier approached within muitam inches, made comments about who fits in the space, referenced comfort and responsibility, did not make physical contact, retreated after direct eye contact. 3 potential witnesses, 2 male passengers at adjacent table, 1 bartender. She saved the entry and closed the app. Then she did something she'd done thousands of times in her career, something that looked like nothing from the outside but was everything from the inside. She took a slow breath, held it for 4 counts, released it for 6. The technique was older than any job she'd held, older than any title she'd earned, and it worked the same way it always had, compressing anger into focus, converting indignation into data, turning a moment that was designed to diminish her into raw material she could use later. On her phone screen, between the 14 unread emails about the Keating acquisition and Lorraine Okafor's congratulatory text, A calendar notification pulsed. Numzio hai mui fut chiu. Board flight mot tam bon bay. Gate B get noi bon bay. 42 minutes. She didn't know yet what was coming at that gate. But her notes app was open. Her phone was charged to 87%. And she'd spent the last 2 hours documenting every interaction with the clinical precision of someone who'd been doing this, whatever this was, for a very long time. At the gate counter 40 feet below and 1 level down, a junior gate agent named Danica Villanueva was staring at a reservation screen. Sable Merritt's booking glowed in standard white text. Seat Baba, first class, confirmed, paid in full 9 weeks ago. Danica was 26. 2 years on the job. Good performance reviews. The kind of employee who smiled at every passenger and remembered the names of the regulars. She'd been assigned to Gate B47 for the afternoon shift, which meant she'd be working alongside Trent Holloway, the lead agent whose unofficial policy was that certain passengers needed extra attention during boarding. She glanced over her shoulder. Holloway was in the break room. The gate area was still mostly empty. Boarding wouldn't start for another 40 minutes. She clicked into the seat assignment module, selected 3A, typed a reassignment code, selected a new passenger name from the standby list, Langford, Margot. Override reason, agent discretion, fair class audit. She minimized the window, picked up the next boarding pass from the stack. Smiled at the approaching passenger. A grandmother with a rolling suitcase and a worried expression about connections. "Don't worry," Danica said warmly. "You've got plenty of time." The modification log recorded the transaction with the indifferent precision of all databases. 4:41 p.m. Mountain Time. Seat Baba reassigned from Merritt, Sable to Langford, Margot. Override code, manual agent entry. Workstation, DE Ngach Noi B Bon Bay Gek Noi Kung Hai. Agent ID D Gach Noi Villanueva. 6 minutes later, a fair class audit flag appeared on Sable Merritt's reservation. Manual entry. Same workstation. The flag that would trigger everything that followed, placed before there was any irregularity to find, before any system error to investigate, before any reason at all to question whether a confirmed, paid, first-class ticket belonged to the woman whose name was on it. Nobody told Sable. She was still in the lounge with her eyes closed, 14 unread emails on her phone, and a $120 million deal drying on the signature page inside her tote bag. At 4:55 p.m., Sable gathered her things and walked to Gate B47. The boarding area was crowded now, holiday weekend, full flight, the particular energy of 300 people competing for overhead bin space and armrest territory. She found a seat near the windows and waited, tote bag on her lap, one hand resting on the document sleeve the way someone might rest a hand on a wallet in a crowded subway. Not paranoid. Practiced. The gate agent at the podium was a man in his mid-30s with close-cropped hair and a posture that belonged more in a formation than behind a check-in counter. His name badge read Holloway, T. Lead agent. His shoulders were broad enough that the navy blazer strained at the seams, and he scanned boarding passes with mechanical efficiency, barely looking at the passengers attached to them. Tap. Beep. Next. Tap. Beep. Next. A machine in a blazer, processing humanity at 30-second intervals. At 5:02 p.m., the PA crackled. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We'll now begin boarding flight Motambun Bay, service to New York JFK. We invite our first-class passengers and Diamond Medallion members to board at this time." Sable stood, picked up her tote, joined the short line forming at the podium. Ahead of her, the gray-suited businessman from TSA. Behind her, Margot Langford, now wearing a smile that suggested she knew something Sable didn't. Her carry-on rolling behind her with the practiced ease of a woman who flew every week and considered airports her second living room. The businessman scanned through. Beep, green, nod, gone. Sable stepped forward, handed her boarding pass to Trent Holloway. He scanned it. The machine beeped, but the screen flashed yellow instead of green, a flag. Holloway frowned, scanned it again. Same result, yellow. The word review appeared in a small box on his screen. "Ma'am, There seems to be a discrepancy with your booking." He didn't look at her when he said it. He was looking at his screen. "I'll need you to step aside while we verify." "What discrepancy?" "I'm not able to share the specifics right now. If you could just step to the side." "My ticket is confirmed. First class. Seat Baba, booked 9 weeks ago." "I understand, ma'am." His voice carried the particular patience of someone who had rehearsed this, not the patience of someone trying to help, but the patience of someone running out a clock. "But the system is showing an irregularity, and I need to resolve it before I can let you board. If you'll just step aside." "What irregularity, specifically?" Holloway looked at her for the first time. His eyes moved from her face to the hoodie to the running shoes and back. The assessment took less than a second, but it was as loud as a shout. His expression didn't change. It didn't need to. The inventory was complete, the conclusion was drawn, and everything that followed would be built on the foundation of that single glance. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. You're holding up the line." Behind Sable, Margot Langford sighed. The theatrical, performative sigh of someone who wanted everyone within earshot to know she was inconvenienced. It was the kind of sigh that filled a room, that turned heads, that transformed a private moment into a public spectacle. Some people buy tickets they can't actually use. The words weren't quite whispered. They were pitched at that precise volume designed to be heard by everyone while maintaining plausible deniability. "I didn't say it to her. I was just talking." The 2 men from the lounge stood behind Margot, and one of them, the shorter one, wire-rimmed glasses, expensive watch, let out a small laugh. Not a full laugh, a permission laugh, the kind that tells the speaker their cruelty has been received and approved. Sable stepped aside, not because she accepted the situation, because she'd been trained, by experience, by repetition, by the cumulative weight of every identical moment that had come before this one, to know that the next 60 seconds would determine whether this became an incident report or a headline, and she intended to control which one. She stood 3 feet from the podium, tote bag on her shoulder, and opened her phone's notes app. Typed, "Numzo Bonfut Chiu, Gate Bigat Noi Bon Bay." Boarding pass scanned. System flagged yellow. Lead Agent Holloway. T asked me to step aside. No specific reason given. Holloway examined my appearance before speaking. Passenger behind me made audible comment re ticket legitimacy. One additional passenger laughed. She photographed Holloway's name badge from where she stood. No zoom, no dramatic gesture. Just a quick tap of the camera icon, the kind of action that looked like checking a text message unless you were paying close attention. Holloway noticed. His jaw tightened. The muscles along the side of his neck pulled taut, the tendons standing out like cables. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to put your phone away. I'm documenting the interaction for my records." "There's nothing to document. This is a routine verification." "Then it should be resolved quickly. Document the deviation. Note the procedure gap." She murmured the words to herself, so quiet that Holloway couldn't hear them, but the passenger nearest her, a middle-aged woman clutching a neck pillow, caught the phrase and looked confused. The words were clinical, not legal jargon, not corporate speak, not the language of a frightened traveler. Something else, something trained. Margot Langford boarded. Her pass scanned green on the first try. She paused at the jet bridge entrance and looked back at Sable with an expression that mixed pity and satisfaction in equal parts, the look of someone watching a problem get handled. Then she walked through, her carry-on wheels clicking against the jet bridge floor, the sound fading as she disappeared toward first class. Toward seat Baba. The seat that had belonged to Sable 12 minutes ago and now had Margot's name on it. Danica Villanueva stood at the secondary counter, processing standby passengers. She did not look at Sable, did not make eye contact, did not acknowledge that anything unusual was happening at the podium 3 feet away. She typed steadily, smiled at passengers, and projected the careful neutrality of someone who had lit a fuse and walked away from the building. 3 more first-class passengers boarded. Then 5. Then 10. Each one scanned through without hesitation. Not one was asked to step aside. Not one was told there was a discrepancy. Not one was examined from hoodie to sneakers before being addressed. An elderly couple holding hands, a woman in yoga pants carrying a toddler, a college kid in a wrinkled t-shirt with headphones around his neck. All passed through the invisible gate that Sable had been denied. Sable stood, waited, documented. Each boarding pass that scanned green was another data point. Each unquestioned passenger was another line in the complaint she was already composing in her head. At 5:11 p.m., 7 minutes after the initial stop, a man in a short-sleeved dress shirt and clip-on tie emerged from the operations room behind the gate counter. His ID lanyard read, Stroud, K. Compliance Supervisor. He carried a manila folder and the expression of someone who had been briefed on a problem and had already chosen a solution before hearing both sides. Ms. Merritt? He pronounced her name carefully, as though reading it for the first time, each syllable given equal weight. I'm Keith Stroud, Compliance Supervisor. I've been made aware of a flag on your reservation, and I'd like to help resolve this as quickly as possible. I'd like that too. What's the flag? Stroud opened the manila folder, pulled out a printed document, 2 pages, single-spaced, the paper slightly warm from a printer that had produced it recently. We've implemented a fair class audit protocol for premium cabin tickets, random verification to ensure ticketing integrity. Your reservation was selected for review. He said random the way people say random when the randomness has a pattern they'd rather not examine. May I see that document? Stroud hesitated, the hesitation of a man who hadn't expected someone to ask to read the prop. Then he handed it over. Sable studied it. 2 pages. Internal memo format. No airline letterhead. No revision date. No regulatory reference number. No FAA citation. No DOT approval stamp. Just an internal header. Draft, fair integrity. Review procedure. A block of procedural language that read like it had been written by someone who knew what policy documents looked like, but had never actually filed one, and a signature line that was blank. No name, no date, no authority. She photographed both pages with her phone, front and back, held the document up to the overhead light to check for watermarks or printing inconsistencies, then handed it back. This is an internal draft memo. It's unsigned and undated. It's not part of your published contract of carriage, which under Mui Bon CFR High, Trum Num Mui Ba Chum Bon, you're required to make available to ticketed passengers. This document has no regulatory authority over my booking. She'd read the citation from a screenshot on her phone. She'd photographed the relevant section of the contract of carriage 9 months ago, after a similar incident on a different airline, and kept it in a folder on her phone labeled Travel Docs, between her passport photo and her TSA pre-check confirmation. Stroud's mouth opened, closed, opened again, the cycle of a man recalibrating. Ma'am, I assure you this is standard operating. It has no letterhead, no revision date, no regulatory reference, no signature. Show me where in the published contract of carriage, the one filed with the Department of Transportation, it authorizes this audit for a confirmed paid ticket, not the internal memo, the filed tariff. The tariff is a complex document. Then you should have no trouble citing the relevant section. Silence. Stroud looked at the memo in his hands, as though it had betrayed him. Then he looked at Holloway, who had been listening while scanning passes, his jaw working like he was chewing something bitter. A look passed between them, not words, but a conversation nonetheless. The look said, "This isn't going the way we expected." She wasn't supposed to read the document. She was supposed to be intimidated by the document. Stroud turned back to Sable. His voice dropped half a register, the unconscious shift of a man switching from customer service to authority. Ms. Merritt, you're welcome to file a complaint with our Customer Relations Department after your flight. Right now, I need to complete this review before I can authorize your boarding. You've been reviewing for 9 minutes. Your own system confirmed my ticket when it was scanned. What additional review is required? Ma'am, my name is Sable Merritt. It's on the boarding pass your agent scanned, and it's on the ticket I paid for 9 weeks ago. You can use it. Stroud retreated to the operations room with his manila folder and his unsigned memo. leaving Sable standing at the gate with no resolution, no explanation, and 11 minutes of her life she wouldn't get back. She typed in her notes app, 5:11 p.m., Compliance Supervisor Stroud. K produced internal draft memo labeled Fair Integrity Review Procedure. Document has no letterhead, no date, no regulatory citation, no signature. Photographed both pages. Stroud unable to cite contract of carriage provision. Retreated to operations without resolution. Around her, the first-class boarding continued. A couple in matching designer jackets, his and hers, the kind that cost a mortgage payment, scanned through without a glance. The woman looked at Sable as she passed, then leaned toward her partner and said something that made him look back over his shoulder. They didn't stop. They didn't ask if she was okay. They just looked and judged and moved on. An older gentleman in a cardigan, 70 at least, with the gentle posture of a retired professor, paused at the podium after scanning his pass. He'd been watching the entire exchange from a seat near the window, and he addressed Holloway in a quiet voice that Sable could barely hear. "Young man, is there a reason that woman has been standing there for 10 minutes while the rest of us board?" "It's being handled, sir." "It doesn't look like it's being handled. It looks like she's being singled out." Holloway's jaw tightened. "Sir, I need you to proceed down the jet bridge." The older man looked at Sable. She met his eyes. He nodded. A small gesture of acknowledgement, of witness, of someone seeing what was happening and wanting her to know he saw it. Then he walked through the door, because that was the limit of what most people were willing to do: see, acknowledge, and leave. It was more than most had done. Sable added him to her notes. Not as a complaint, but as a potential witness. Elderly male passenger, gray cardigan, approximately Bay Mui, asked gate agent about delay. Holloway told him to proceed. Passenger appeared sympathetic. At 5:14 p.m., Holloway made a phone call. Short, clipped, the kind of call that summons rather than discusses. He cupped his hand over the phone, turned away from the podium, and spoke 3 sentences that Sable couldn't hear. Then he hung up, returned to his position, and continued scanning passes as though the call hadn't happened. 2 minutes later, he stepped out from behind the podium and walked toward Sable. His stride had changed. Longer, more deliberate, the walk of someone who had received instructions and was executing them. "Ma'am, I've contacted airport police. They'll be here shortly to assist with the verification process." The temperature in Sable's chest dropped 3 degrees. Not fear, recognition. She knew this escalation. She'd seen it play out in conference rooms and boardrooms and parking lots and hotel lobbies and 100 other spaces where a black woman's presence was treated as a problem requiring armed resolution. The pattern was always the same: confusion first, then authority, then force. And the force never felt like force to the people deploying it. It always felt like procedure. "You've called the police," she said. Not a question. A statement that demanded acknowledgement. "For assistance. Standard procedure when a passenger is non-compliant. I've been standing here for 12 minutes, answering every question you and Mr. Stroud have asked. I have not raised my voice. I have not made threats. I have not refused a lawful instruction. In what specific way am I non-compliant?" Holloway didn't answer. He returned to the podium and continued scanning passengers as though nothing had happened, as though calling armed officers on a woman with a valid boarding pass was the same as requesting a wheelchair or paging a passenger for a gate change. Around them, the gate area had taken on a different quality. The ambient noise continued. Announcements, conversations, the electronic chirp of boarding passes, but a pocket of silence had formed around Sable, a small exclusion zone where other passengers redirected their paths to avoid walking too close. Some looked at her with concern. Some looked away. Some looked with the guilty fascination of people watching an accident they couldn't prevent and didn't want to be associated with. A woman in a business suit caught Sable's eye and mouthed the words, "Are you okay?" Sable nodded. The woman looked away, did not approach, did not intervene, did not offer her name or her witness. The desire to help and the fear of involvement wrestling behind her eyes, and fear winning the way it usually did. 3 minutes later, Officer Bryce Nolan arrived. He was mid-40s, built like someone who'd been athletic 20 years ago and had since settled into the comfortable solidity of desk work, punctuated by occasional foot patrols. 15 years with Denver International Airport Police. His uniform was pressed, his equipment belt organized with the precision of long habit, and his approach vector told Sable everything she needed to know about how this was going to go. Because he walked directly toward her, not toward Holloway. Not toward the person who'd called. Toward the person who'd been called about. He didn't ask Holloway what had happened. Didn't seek context. Didn't get both sides before choosing a side. He walked to the black woman standing alone at the edge of the boarding area, and he addressed her the way you address a suspect, not with curiosity, but with authority. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Nolan, Airport Police. Can I see some identification?" "I'd be happy to provide ID. Can you tell me first what I'm being investigated for?" "Nobody said investigated. I just need to verify your identity in connection with a gate incident." "There is no incident. I'm a ticketed passenger who was asked to step aside during boarding. No crime has been alleged, no disruption has occurred, and no airline employee has been able to explain why I was stopped." "Ma'am, I need your ID. We can do this easy, or we can do this complicated." The word complicated landed like a stone dropped into still water. It wasn't a threat, not technically, but it carried the weight of 15 years of airport police authority, 15 years of interactions where complicated meant handcuffs and holding rooms and missed flights and lawyers, and the kind of afternoon that ruined a week. She reached into her tote bag for her wallet. The movement was slow, deliberate. The careful choreography of a black woman reaching into a bag in front of a police officer. Every gesture calculated to avoid the word threatening appearing in any report filed later. She unzipped the outer pocket, removed the wallet, extracted the license, extended it. Nolan didn't take it cleanly. He reached past the license and closed his hand around her wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, but firmly enough that she couldn't pull away. His fingers overlapped around the joint. His thumb pressed into the space between the tendons. "Just hold still." He took the license with his other hand, and then, only then, released her wrist. The entire contact lasted maybe 2 seconds. Long enough to leave the ghost of pressure on her skin, long enough to be a message: "I can touch you, and you can't stop me." Sable did not react visibly, but beneath the hoodie, the muscles along her shoulders pulled tight, not with fear, but with the controlled restraint of someone whose training included responses to physical contact that she was choosing not to deploy. She noted the time, numzo muy chinfut chiu. She noted the grip, right hand around left wrist, firm pressure, approximately 2 seconds. She noted the absence of any procedural justification for the contact. And she filed it in the same mental compartment where she stored every other moment like this. The compartment that was full but never closed. That grew heavier with each addition but never spilled over, because spilling over was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not here, not now. Not in front of a man with a badge and a radio and the unilateral authority to decide that her afternoon ended in a holding room instead of a first-class seat. Nolan examined the license, front, back, held it up to the overhead light, compared the photo to her face, compared it again. His thumb pressed against the card's edge hard enough to bend the plastic slightly. Then, and this was the moment that would matter most in the months that followed, he turned and walked to his patrol vehicle parked at the concourse junction, 40 feet away. He sat in the driver's seat, typed on his in-car terminal, and ran her name through the National Crime Information Center database. An NCIC query, a federal criminal record search, on a woman whose only offense was standing at a boarding gate with a valid ticket and a hoodie that didn't match someone's idea of first class. The query required justification. Reasonable, articulable suspicion of criminal activity, that was the standard, per Department of Justice CJIS security policy. When Nolan submitted the search, the system prompted him for a justification code, a drop-down menu with options: warrant check, fugitive investigation, suspicious criminal activity, traffic stop, incident response. He left the field blank, submitted the query anyway. The result came back in 14 seconds. Merit. Sable A. No record. No warrants. No wants. Clean. As clean as a database could confirm. A life lived entirely within the law, reduced to 2 words on a screen. No record. Sable watched him from the gate area. She couldn't see his screen from 40 feet away, but she could read the sequence. The walk to the car, the typing, the pause, the return. She knew exactly what an NCIC check looked like. She'd seen it done. She'd seen it done to people who deserved it and people who didn't, and the ratio between those 2 categories was worse than anyone in uniform wanted to admit. She opened her notes app. 5:21 p.m. Officer Nolan walked to patrol vehicle after receiving my Colorado DL. Appeared to run computer query. Typing observed. Pause of approximately chinmui seconds consistent with database search, followed by return. Total time with my ID, approximately bay minutes. Nolan walked back. His expression had shifted. Not softer, but recalibrated. The absence of a criminal record hadn't changed his posture or his assumptions. It had just removed one tool from his belt. He handed the license back. Not with care. He held it between 2 fingers and extended it at arm's length, the way someone hands back something they'd prefer not to touch. License checks out. He said it the way you'd say the lab results came back negative, with surprise rather than relief, as though a clean record was the unexpected outcome, as though guilt was the default and innocence was the anomaly. Am I free to board my flight? Nolan looked at Holloway. Holloway looked at Nolan. Neither spoke. The silent negotiation of 2 men who'd been expecting a different result and didn't have a script for this one. That's between you and the gate agent. Nolan stepped back, didn't leave, just retreated to a position near the windows, present but no longer primary. A uniform in the background, available if needed. His hand rested on his equipment belt, thumb hooked near the radio, the universal posture of a man who wanted you to know he could escalate again at any moment. The visual message was clear. You may have passed the check, but we're still watching. Sable turned to Holloway. The jet bridge was still open. Passengers were still boarding, though the flow had slowed to a trickle. Final group, stragglers, the last few overhead bin optimists, shuffling toward the podium with bags too large and hopes too high. I'd like to board now. Holloway looked at his screen, looked at Sable, and then he did something that would be captured clearly on Dennis Yu's recording from 40 feet away, something that would be replayed thousands of times in the weeks that followed, something that no amount of context or standard procedure would ever adequately explain. He stepped into the jet bridge entrance, planted his feet shoulder-width apart, extended his right arm across the opening, palm flat against the wall, bicep locked. Ma'am, I haven't released you to board yet. The arm was a wall, not a suggestion, not a barrier that could be walked around. A physical obstruction placed between a ticketed passenger and her confirmed seat by a man who had already been told, by his own system and his own police, that there was no reason to stop her. Your system confirmed my ticket. The officer cleared my identification. On what grounds are you physically preventing me from boarding my confirmed flight? I need authorization from my supervisor. Your supervisor was here 9 minutes ago. He left without resolving anything. Then I'll need to reach him again. While my flight boards without me. Holloway said nothing. His arm didn't move. Sable looked at the arm, looked at the man behind it, looked at the 300 people who could see a uniformed airline employee blocking a black woman from walking onto a plane she'd paid for. Some of them were watching openly now. Others had turned away, made suddenly fascinated by their phones, or their shoelaces, or the departure board above the gate. The ones who watched and the ones who looked away were committing the same act, witnessing, just with different levels of honesty about it. She did not step forward, did not raise her voice, did not touch him or attempt to push past. She took one deliberate step backward, creating space between herself and the obstruction, and pulled out her phone. She opened the voice memo app and began speaking in a tone so calm, so measured, so precisely controlled that it sounded less like a passenger complaint and more like a formal record being dictated for transcription. 5:24 p.m. Mountain Time. Denver International Airport, Gate B Bon Muy Bay, Flight Mot Ngin Tam Trum Bon Muy Bay to New York. JFK lead gate agent Trent Holloway is physically blocking the jet bridge entrance with his arm extended. My boarding pass has been scanned and confirmed by the airline's own system. Officer Bryce Nolan of Denver International Airport Police has verified my Colorado driver's license and confirmed no criminal record. Compliance Supervisor Keith Stroud produced an internal draft memo, unsigned, undated, with no letterhead and no regulatory citation, as the sole basis for detaining me. I have been standing at this gate for 20 minutes. I am the only passenger who has been stopped. I am documenting this interaction for potential filing under Bon Muy Chin USC section Bon Muy Ngin Mot Trum Hai Muy Bay, which prohibits discrimination by air carriers, and Bon Muy Hai USC section Mot Ngin Chin Chum Tham Muy Mot, which protects the right to make and enforce contracts regardless of race. She recited the statutes with the fluency of someone who hadn't just memorized numbers but understood the architecture behind them, the legislative history, the case law, the enforcement mechanisms. The words came out the way words come out of people who have spent years in rooms where language is precision and precision is power. Not legal jargon, not bluster, competence so deep it had become instinct. Drop a like right now if you can already feel what's building, because the receipts haven't even started yet, and this woman is just getting warmed up. Holloway's arm wavered. A tremor, not visible to the crowd, but visible to Sable, who was standing close enough to see the tendons in his wrist shift, not because he'd been persuaded, because he'd been recorded and he knew it, and the calculation behind his eyes was shifting from, how do I stop this, to how bad does this get for me? I'm going to need to consult with my supervisor before... You've consulted with your supervisor. Mr. Stroud was here 11 minutes ago. He produced a document with no legal authority and left without resolving the issue. I'm now asking for your station manager. Not your compliance supervisor, your station manager. I don't have authority to... You have authority to physically block a ticketed passenger from boarding. You can find the authority to make a phone call. The gate area had gone quiet in the way that airports almost never go quiet. The human sounds suspended, the mechanical sounds continuing, creating an eerie soundtrack of announcements and ventilation and the distant rumble of aircraft while 300 people held their breath. Somewhere in the middle distance, a child asked her mother what was happening, and the mother said, "Shh, not now." Holloway's arm came down, slowly, the way a flag comes down when the battle is over, but nobody wants to admit who won. He reached for the operations phone mounted on the podium wall and dialed a number without looking at it. While he waited for someone to answer, Sable stood motionless. Her phone was still recording. Her notes app was still open. Her tote bag hung from her shoulder with the weight of 312 pages and $120 million, and nobody within 50 feet had any idea what that bag contained, and that was exactly how she wanted it. The phone connected. Holloway spoke in a low voice, turning his back. Sable couldn't hear the words, but she could read the body language. The hunched shoulders, the hand on the counter for support, the nodding. He was getting instructions. Someone higher up was making a decision. He hung up, turned back. Station manager is on his way. It'll be a few minutes. I've been waiting 22 minutes. A few more minutes. Sable waited. Not because she had to, because each additional minute of documented delay strengthened whatever came next. Each minute was evidence. Each minute was a brick in a wall that these people were building around themselves without realizing they were the ones being walled in. From the secondary counter, Danica Villanueva had stopped pretending to work. She was watching now. Not Sable, but the operations room door, with the expression of someone waiting for a fire alarm to go off in a building they'd set ablaze. Her fingers were still on the keyboard, but they'd stopped moving. At gate B49 across the concourse, Dennis Yu adjusted his phone angle slightly. 22 minutes of continuous footage. His battery was at 38%. He plugged in a power bank without taking his eyes off Gate B Bon Muy Bay. Officer Nolan remained at his position near the windows. He'd crossed his arms, the universal posture of law enforcement observation, the visual equivalent of "I'm watching you." His radio crackled periodically with other calls, other incidents, other problems in other parts of the airport that required attention. He ignored all of them, Whatever was happening at Gate B47 had become his priority, and the fact that he couldn't explain why, couldn't articulate what crime was being investigated or what threat was being assessed, didn't change the fact that he'd committed to this position, and leaving now would feel like retreat. Margot Langford, meanwhile, had reappeared. She'd been on the plane, settled in first class. Drink ordered. Prosecco, her usual. But the pull of unfinished business had dragged her back to the jet bridge entrance, where she stood just inside the threshold, close enough to hear and see and participate, without technically being part of the scene. "Oh, are they finally letting you on?" The word finally elongated, stretched like taffy, dripping with condescension. "I was worried they'd found something on your record. You can never be too careful these days." The comment landed in the quiet gate area like a grenade thrown into a pond. Ripples of discomfort spread outward. Passengers shifting in their seats, eyes dropping to phones, the collective cringe of people witnessing cruelty they wouldn't challenge. Sable did not respond to Margot. She had not responded to Margot in the lounge, had not responded to Margot at the gate, and she would not respond to Margot now. But her notes app gained another entry. Numjo Haimui Salfuchiu. Passenger from first-class boarding line returned to jet bridge area. Made third public comment directed at About Me. Referenced criminal record check. 6 or more witnesses within earshot. Margot waited for a response that didn't come. Her smile thinned. The asymmetry of the exchange bothered her. She was performing for an audience, and the target of her performance refused to be part of the show. "Well," she said to no one in particular, adjusting her jacket, "I suppose some people just have a hard time following rules." She turned and walked back down the jet bridge toward her stolen seat, her heels clicking against the floor in a rhythm that sounded, to Sable, exactly like a clock counting down. The boarding line had moved steadily while all of this was happening. General boarding, groups 2 through 5, had been called and processed. The gate area was emptying, the crowd thinning from 300 to 100 to 50. Stragglers and standby passengers shuffled toward the podium. And Sable stood at the window, 22 minutes into a detention that nobody had been able to justify, watching the last passengers disappear down the jet bridge toward a flight she had paid for, toward a seat that had been given away, toward a door that would close in minutes. A man in the boarding line, 50s, red polo shirt, the flushed complexion of someone who'd been drinking in the terminal bar, noticed Sable standing by the window, noticed the distance between her and the podium, noticed the uniformed officer leaning against the wall nearby, and drew his own conclusions. What did she do? He said it to the woman beside him, but loud enough for Sable to hear, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I have no idea," the woman murmured, turning away. "Must have been something, right? If they called the cops." He shifted his carry-on to his other hand and looked directly at Sable. The kind of long, unblinking stare that people use when they want you to know you're being evaluated. "Hey, maybe just get on the next flight, huh? Save everyone the trouble." The casual cruelty of a stranger who had decided that the presence of a police officer near a black woman was its own evidence, who had tried and convicted her in the time it took to glance from the uniform to her face and back, who would board the plane in 2 minutes and never think about this moment again, because moments like this cost people like him nothing. Sable looked at him, did not respond. She had stopped responding to strangers' verdicts years ago, the way you stop jumping at shadows after you've lived in the dark long enough. She noted the time, noted the comment, added it to the archive in her notes app, another line of text, another timestamp, another brick in a wall she was building that they couldn't see. The man boarded. The woman beside him boarded. 40 more passengers boarded. 50. The line shortened. The gate area emptied. And still, Sable stood. The last person in the gate area who was supposed to be on that plane. The only one who hadn't been allowed to walk through the door. She could feel the approach of a deadline, not just the flight's departure, but the point beyond which this incident would cross from customer service failure into something with a different legal name. 22 minutes of delay with no explanation wasn't an inconvenience. It was a pattern. It was what federal regulators called disparate treatment, the measurable, documentable difference between how she had been processed and how every other passenger at gate B47 had been processed that afternoon. Her phone showed the time, 5:26 p.m., 14 minutes until scheduled departure, and still no authorization, no resolution, no answer to the only question that mattered. Why her? Stroud emerged from operations. He'd been joined by a second figure, a woman in a navy suit, early 40s, with a wireless earpiece and the expression of someone who'd been interrupted from something more important than this. Her badge read District Lead, Operations. She surveyed the scene in 3 seconds. Sable standing alone, Holloway at the podium, Nolan by the windows, 300 passengers watching. Her face performed a rapid sequence of calculations that had less to do with customer service and more to do with damage containment. She spoke briefly with Stroud, inaudible, but the body language told the story. Stroud gestured toward Sable. The district lead looked at her clipboard, looked at her phone, then approached Sable with the measured stride of someone walking toward a liability. "Ms. Merritt, I'm the district operations lead. I understand there's been a delay with your boarding. I want to apologize for the inconvenience and get you on this flight immediately." "I'd appreciate that. I'd also appreciate understanding why I was stopped in the first place." The district lead glanced at Holloway, at Nolan, at Stroud. None of them offered an explanation. The silence was its own kind of testimony. The silence of people who knew the answer and knew the answer was indefensible. "It appears there was a system irregularity with your seat assignment. It's been corrected. You're cleared to board." "What irregularity?" "I don't have the specifics in front of me. My seat is Baba, first class, confirmed 9 weeks ago. Was that seat reassigned to another passenger?" "I will need to look into the details. Was it reassigned?" The direct question hung in the air. The district lead's professional composure held, but her eyes moved. A quick flick to Stroud, who looked at the floor, then to Danica's workstation, which was now dark and logged off. "I'll follow up with you directly via email. For now, let's get you to your seat." Sable held her ground for 3 beats. 1, 2, 3. Long enough to make the silence a statement. Long enough to communicate that she was choosing to board, choosing, not being permitted, and that the conversation was being tabled, not concluded. Then she walked toward the jet bridge. And Holloway, perhaps out of reflex, perhaps out of the same instinct that had made him extend his arm 20 minutes earlier, perhaps out of the particular resentment of a man who'd been recorded losing an argument he'd expected to win, reached out and grabbed her tote bag strap. Not a tap, not a brush. A grab, his fist closing around the leather strap where it sat on her shoulder, pulling backward with enough force that Sable's momentum stopped and her body rocked back a half step. The strap dug into her shoulder, the leather biting through the hoodie fabric. Inside the bag, 312 pages of acquisition agreement shifted, the weight swinging like a pendulum. The gate area heard it before they saw it. The sharp intake of breath from the passenger nearest the podium, a woman who'd been pretending to read a magazine and now wasn't pretending anything. Then the visual, Holloway's hand on the strap, Sable pulled backward, the frozen tableau of a man who had put his hands on a woman who'd been told she could go. "Hey," someone said from the boarding area. A man's voice, anonymous, alarmed. The single syllable hung in the air, incomplete, because the man who'd started to speak thought better of finishing. Sable looked down at his hand on her bag strap, looked at the white knuckles, looked at the wrinkled fabric of the strap where his grip compressed it. Then she looked up at his face. "Remove your hand." 2 words, no volume, no tremor, no anger visible on the surface, though beneath it something vast and dark was moving, the way deep water moves before a wave breaks. The kind of command that comes from a place so deep and so certain that it doesn't need emphasis to be heard. Holloway's fingers opened. The strap slid free. Sable's shoulder throbbed where the leather had bitten in, a dull ache that she catalogued alongside the wrist pressure from Nolan. 2 instances of unwanted physical contact in 25 minutes, both by people in uniform or quasi-uniform, both performed with the casual confidence of men who believed their authority extended to other people's bodies. "I just needed to—" "You needed to remove your hand, which you've done." She adjusted the strap on her shoulder, shifted the weight of the bag, and walked down the jet bridge without looking back. Behind her, she could hear Holloway's breathing, heavy, irregular, the breath of a man who was just beginning to understand that the last 25 minutes had not gone the way he'd been promised, through the aircraft door. Turned left into the first-class cabin. Seat Ba A was occupied. A white man in a golf shirt sat in the window seat, noise-canceling headphones on, eyes closed, completely unaware that the seat beneath him had been taken from someone else and given to him by a 26-year-old gate agent whose keystrokes at 4:41 p.m. had set the entire evening in motion. His boarding pass was tucked into the seat pocket, the seat number printed on it clearly visible. Bay A. Her seat, given to a stranger, while she stood at the gate being interrogated about whether she deserved to be here at all. A flight attendant approached, young, efficient, already reading the tension on Sable's face. "Ms. Merritt, there seems to have been a seat assignment change. We have you in Baba, the aisle seat just across. My original booking was Bay A window, confirmed 9 weeks ago. I did not authorize any change." "I understand, and I apologize for the confusion. It looks like the assignment was modified at the gate. Modified by whom, and on whose authority?" The flight attendant hesitated. She was trained for beverage service and safety demonstrations, not for the aftermath of whatever had just happened at the gate. "I'd need to check with the gate team. The gate team detained me for 25 minutes, had my ID run through a criminal database, physically blocked me from boarding, and grabbed my bag as I walked past. I'd prefer not to rely on the gate team for accurate information." The flight attendant's professional composure cracked, not into hostility, but into the genuine discomfort of someone who was beginning to understand that something had gone very wrong, and that she was standing at the edge of it. "Let me speak with the purser. We'll sort this out." 2 minutes later, the purser appeared. A woman in her 50s, with the easy authority of someone who had managed first-class cabins for decades. A quiet conversation with the man in Baba, who turned out to be perfectly agreeable about moving. He hadn't requested the seat change, had simply been assigned it when he checked in at the gate, and had no objection to the aisle. Sable took her window seat, stored her tote bag under the seat, document sleeve facing her, within reach, buckled her seatbelt, adjusted the ventilation nozzle above her head, angling it so the airflow hit her face directly, cool, mechanical, impersonal. The opposite of everything that had just happened. Her hands were shaking. Not visibly, not the kind of shaking anyone could see. The kind that happens inside, when the adrenaline that's been holding you upright for 25 minutes finally starts to metabolize and leaves behind a chemical residue that makes your fingers feel electric and your jaw ache from clenching. She pressed her hands flat against her thighs, counted to 10. The shaking subsided. It always did. The body was a machine, and machines responded to input, and she'd spent years learning which inputs controlled which outputs. Breath for heart rate, pressure for tremor, stillness for rage. She'd learned these techniques in places that had nothing to do with airports or airlines or first-class cabins, in rooms where the stakes were higher than a seat assignment, in situations where losing composure meant losing more than a flight. But she didn't think about those rooms now. She thought about the Notes app on her phone, and the photographs of Holloway's badge and Stroud's unsigned memo, and the voice recording that captured every word she'd said at the jet bridge, and the bruise that was probably forming on her left wrist where Nolan's thumb had pressed into the tendons. She pushed up the sleeve of her hoodie, looked at her wrist under the reading light. Faint redness. Not a bruise yet. That would take hours. But she photographed it anyway. Timestamp. Numzo ba mui tam fuchio, left wrist. Redness consistent with grip pressure. Created during ID request by Officer Nolan at approximately Numzo mui chin fuchio. She added the photo to the same Notes entry. Then she photographed her right shoulder, pulling the hoodie collar aside to show the red line where the tote bag strap had been yanked backward. Timestamp. Numzo ba mui tam fuchio, right shoulder. Strap abrasion from bag grab by Agent Holloway at approximately 5:29 p.m. Evidence. Documented in real time. The way someone catalogs injuries for a file that doesn't exist yet but will. Through the window she could see the gate area. Holloway at the podium, logging the flight's departure. Nolan leaning against a pillar, thumbs hooked in his equipment belt, watching the jet bridge as though Sable might come back through it. Stroud nowhere in sight, disappeared into operations with his unsigned memo and whatever story he was constructing to explain the last 25 minutes to whoever was above him. And Danica Villanueva's dark workstation, logged off, screen blank, the cursor blinking on nothing. 3 rows behind Sable, Margot Langford sipped Prosecco and told the passenger beside her about the upgrade she'd received at the gate. The agent was lovely, just lovely. She said the seat had opened up. Lucky timing, really. Lucky timing. The plane pushed back from the gate at 5:41 p.m. The engines spooled, the terminal receded. Denver fell away beneath them, the white tent peaks of the airport roof shrinking into the brown expanse of Colorado plains. Sable's phone buzzed as the aircraft climbed through 10,000 feet. A text from a contact saved as L. Okafor. Call me when you land. Something you should know about the airline. 3 prior complaints. DEN. All settled with NDAs. I pulled the filings before they were sealed. 3 prior complaints. Same airport. Same pattern. All silenced. Sable stared at the message. Her jaw tightened. Not in anger, but in the particular tension of someone who has just realized that what happened to them was not an accident, not an anomaly, not the isolated decision of one gate agent on one afternoon. It was infrastructure. It was policy dressed as randomness. It was a system designed to generate exactly this outcome and then bury it under non-disclosure agreements and customer service vouchers and the quiet, efficient machinery of corporate self-preservation. She typed 2 words back. Not settling. Sent. Screen off. Eyes closed. The plane flew east into the darkness, carrying a woman who had closed a $120 million deal that morning and been treated like a trespasser that afternoon. Carrying evidence that was already preserved, already time-stamped, already backed up in cloud storage that no gate agent or compliance supervisor or airport police officer could reach. Carrying the waterproof sleeve with 312 pages and page 47 and a signature in ink that was barely 12 hours dry. She opened her phone one more time. Composed an email. 6 sentences addressed to the airline's chief legal officer. CC'd to L. Okafor. BCC'd to ADOT investigator whose name she knew from a different complaint at a different airline 18 months earlier. The email requested preservation of all gate agent communications, reservation modification logs, security camera footage, NCIC query records, and internal policy documents related to flight Motam Bombay on today's date. It cited the airline's own document retention policy and noted that destruction of responsive documents after receipt of this notice would constitute spoliation of evidence. She read it twice, changed 1 word, sent it. Then she leaned her head against the window and watched the lights of Colorado's eastern plains slide past below. Small towns and highways and the scattered glow of lives being lived without incident, without interrogation, without anyone asking them to prove they'd earned the right to be where they were. Share this story right now with someone who needs to hear it, because what's about to unfold in Part 2 isn't just about one flight or one gate agent. It's about a pattern that was designed to stay invisible, and someone just turned on the lights. At Gate B47, the post-boarding silence settled over the empty concourse. Holloway stood at the podium staring at his screen, not processing anything, just staring. Nolan filed his incident report, 2 paragraphs, carefully vague, the phrase passenger initially non-compliant but eventually boarded without further incident, doing the heavy lifting of converting 25 minutes of documented discrimination into a footnote that would disappear into a filing cabinet. Stroud was on the phone in the operations room. He'd been on the phone since the district lead cleared Sable to board. He was talking to someone above him, and his voice had the tight, controlled quality of a man explaining how a simple fare audit had turned into a situation with police involvement and 300 witnesses and a passenger who cited federal statutes from memory. And Danica Villanueva sat in the break room, eating a protein bar, her shift over, her workstation logged off. The modification she'd entered at 4:41 p.m. sat in the airline's shares reservation system. Time-stamped, attributed, permanent. A digital fingerprint that couldn't be wiped by logging off or walking away, or pretending she'd never touched the keyboard. Across the concourse, Dennis Yu saved his 27-minute recording to 3 separate cloud services, named it, tagged it, did not post it, put his phone in his backpack, shouldered the bag, and walked to his own gate for a different flight to a different city, carrying footage that would matter in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The airport continued, flights departed, flights arrived. The machinery of travel processed people through concourses and security lines and boarding gates, efficient and impersonal, treating everyone equally in theory and selectively in practice. And somewhere at 37,000 feet, crossing into Kansas airspace, Sable Merritt sat in the seat that had been taken from her and reclaimed, composing the architecture of a reckoning that nobody at Gate B47 knew was coming. Her phone showed one new email notification: the airline's legal department responding to her litigation hold notice. The response was a single line: "Your message has been received and forwarded to the appropriate department. Standard, boilerplate." The kind of response that was designed to acknowledge without committing, to receive without responding, to buy time while someone figured out how much trouble they were actually in. They didn't know yet, but they would, because Sable Merritt didn't just close deals for a living. She built cases. She assembled evidence the way she assembled acquisitions, methodically, patiently, with an understanding that the difference between a strong position and a weak one was documentation, and documentation was just another word for paying attention when everyone else assumed you wouldn't. She'd paid attention today. For 25 minutes, while an arm blocked a jet bridge, and a database searched her name, and a stolen seat held a stranger, she had paid attention to every word, every gesture, every timestamp, every failure of procedure and decency and basic human respect. And now, she had receipts. The kind that don't expire. The kind that don't settle. The kind that keep people awake at night, wondering how something so routine, just another passenger, just another flag, just another day, had turned into the worst decision they'd ever made. Part 2. The flight landed at JFK at 11:17 p.m. Eastern Time. 5 hours and 36 minutes of airtime, during which Sable Merritt had not slept, had not watched the in-flight entertainment, had not accepted the meal service beyond a glass of water and a single packet of almonds. She had spent the entire flight working. Not on the Keating acquisition. That was finished. Signed. Filed. Already generating congratulatory emails that would pile up unanswered until Monday. She'd spent the flight building something else. On her phone, in a folder she'd created at 37,000 feet over Kansas, she'd organized every piece of documentation from the afternoon into a chronological evidence file. The Notes app entries, 13 separate timestamps, from the Centurion Lounge at 3:42 p.m. to the jet bridge grab at 5:29 p.m. The photographs, Holloway's badge, Stroud's unsigned memo front and back, her own wrist showing the redness from Nolan's grip, her shoulder showing the strap abrasion from Holloway's grab. The voice memo. 8 minutes and 14 seconds of dictation at the jet bridge, including the statute citations and the real-time description of the physical obstruction. She'd also done something that most passengers wouldn't have thought to do. She'd screenshotted her original booking confirmation from 9 weeks earlier, showing seat BA, first class, paid in full. Then she'd screenshotted the airline app's current seat map, showing her reassignment to Baba C, the change that nobody had authorized, that nobody could explain, that had been entered from workstation DEN Gach Noi B, Bombay Gach Noi, Comhai 6 minutes before she reached the gate. 2 screenshots. The difference between them was the entire case. The taxi from JFK to her hotel in Midtown took 40 minutes. She sat in the back seat watching Queens and then Manhattan slide past the window, the city's lights blurring through glass that needed cleaning. Her phone buzzed steadily. Texts from colleagues about the Keating close, a voicemail from her mother asking about the flight, a calendar reminder for Monday's board debrief. Normal life continuing as though the last 6 hours hadn't happened. At the hotel, she showered for 20 minutes. Not because she needed 20 minutes to get clean, because she needed 20 minutes of hot water and locked doors and the absence of anyone looking at her, assessing her, deciding whether she belonged. She dried off, put on the hotel robe, sat on the bed with her laptop, and called Lorraine Okafor. Lorraine answered on the second ring despite it being past midnight. General Counsel of Vanguard Peak Capital didn't keep regular hours. She kept necessary hours, and the tone in Sable's text message from the plane had signaled that this was necessary. "Tell me everything," Sable told her. "Start to finish. The lounge, the gate, the flag, the memo, the police, the NCIC query, the arm across the jet bridge, the grab, the seat reassignment, the 25 minutes. All of it, narrated with the same clinical precision she'd used in the voice memo, the same time-stamped specificity that turned experience into evidence. Lorraine listened without interrupting. When Sable finished, the silence on the line lasted 4 full seconds. The silence of a litigator processing facts, identifying claims, calculating damages, and deciding how angry to be. "The NCIC query alone is a federal violation," Lorraine's voice had dropped into the register she used in depositions. "Running someone through a criminal database without articulable suspicion, with a blank justification field. That's a DOJCJIS policy breach, and if the officer's department receives federal funding, it could implicate grant conditions under Bay Mui Bon USC section Mui Ngin Hai Trum Hai Mui Tam." "I know. The seat reassignment is provable. The airline's shares system logs every modification with agent ID, workstation, and timestamp. If that log shows a manual override moving your confirmed seat to another passenger before you even reach the gate, that's not a system error. That's premeditation." "I know. And you have photographs and voice recordings?" 13 time-stamped entries, 2 photographs of physical contact aftermath, 1 8-minute voice memo at the jet bridge, 2 photographs of the compliance supervisor's unauthorized policy document. Lorraine exhaled. "Sable, how are you?" The question sat between them. Not a legal question, not a strategic question, a human question, from a woman who had known Sable for 7 years and who understood that the clinical precision wasn't absence of feeling. It was the container that kept the feeling from breaking everything. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. Nobody's fine after something like this." "I'll be fine after we file." "Then we file." A pause. "But there's something else. The 3 prior complaints I mentioned. I pulled the docket summaries before the ND-AS sealed them. All 3 involved black women. All 3 involved gate stops at DEN with no documented justification. All 3 were settled quietly. Mid-5 figures. NDA. No admission of wrongdoing. The airline's outside counsel is Henderson, Pratt, and Cole. They have a playbook for this. Acknowledge, contain, settle, silence. How'd you get sealed docket summaries? I know people who know people. The point is, this isn't an isolated incident. This is a pattern. And patterns change the legal calculus from individual discrimination to systemic practice, which means we're not just talking about a DOT complaint. We're talking about potential class action territory. The words landed in the hotel room like stones dropped into a well. Class action. The kind of case that didn't settle quietly. The kind that made headlines and changed policies and cost airlines not just money, but reputation. The currency that publicly traded companies valued above almost everything else. "I don't want to be a class representative," Sable said. "I want the airline to answer for what happened today. To me, at that gate." "I understand, but here's the problem, and you know this because you've built enough deals to understand leverage. If you file individually, they'll offer mid-6 figures, an NDA, and a promise to review their procedures. You'll sign, they'll cut a check, and 6 months from now, another black woman will be standing at gate B47 while Trent Holloway runs the same playbook. The NDA makes sure nobody connects the dots. The silence that followed wasn't strategic. It was the sound of a woman deciding how much of her privacy she was willing to trade for the chance to change something. "No NDA," Sable said finally. "Whatever we file, whatever we accept, the NDA is off the table. That's non-negotiable." "Understood. I'll start drafting Monday. In the meantime, forward me everything. Every photo, every note, every screenshot. And don't talk to the airline's customer service team if they call." They'll try to get ahead of this with a voucher and an apology before the legal department even knows what hit them. They hung up. Sable sat on the hotel bed, laptop open, phone on the nightstand, the evidence folder glowing on her screen. 13 entries. One afternoon. $120 million closed, and a seat stolen in the same 12-hour span. She forwarded everything to Lorraine. Then she opened a new email to a name she hadn't contacted in 18 months. The DOT investigator she'd met during the previous airline complaint. The one who'd told her, over coffee in a government cafeteria, that aviation discrimination cases were almost impossible to prove individually, but devastating when documented as patterns. The email was 3 sentences. New incident. Denver International. Documentation attached. Same pattern as the cases we discussed. She sent it, closed the laptop, set her alarm for 6 a.m. Then she lay in the dark of the hotel room, listening to the muffled sounds of Manhattan at midnight. Sirens, traffic, the ambient hum of a city that never stopped, and tried to remember the last time she'd gone through an airport without documenting something. She couldn't. If you've ever been treated like you didn't belong somewhere, you earned the right to be. Drop a like right now, because the receipts are about to get read, and trust me, you want to be here for every single one. Monday morning arrived with the weight of everything that had been deferred. The Vanguard Peak offices occupied the 23rd through 26th floors of a glass tower on 17th Street in downtown Denver. Sable had flown back from New York on Sunday night, a different airline, a deliberate choice, and walked into the office at 7:45 a.m. carrying the same tote bag, the same waterproof document sleeve, the same acquisition agreement that was now less than 72 hours old and already generating the kind of returns that would justify the firm's investment thesis for years. The board debrief happened at 9. 6 partners around a walnut conference table, financial projections on the screen, Sable presenting the Keating deal structure with the focused precision that had made her the firm's top deal maker for 3 consecutive years. The questions were technical: purchase price allocation, tax structuring, integration timeline. Nobody asked about her flight home. Nobody knew there was anything to ask about. At 10:15, after the boardroom emptied, Lorraine Okafor closed the conference room door. "I've drafted the DOT complaint." She placed a folder on the table. Formal filing under Bonmui Chin, USC section, Bonmui Ngin Motram Hai Mui Bay, prohibition of discrimination by air carriers. I've also drafted a parallel complaint to the Colorado Civil Rights Division under CRS Hai Mui Bongut Noi Ba Mui Bongut Noi Sautram Le Mot, and a preservation demand letter to the airline's chief legal officer with a copy to their outside counsel at Henderson, Pratt & Cole. She opened the folder. 3 documents, each clipped separately. The DOT complaint ran 12 pages. The state complaint ran 8. The preservation letter ran 3. Walk me through the claims. Lorraine pulled a chair close. Primary federal claim. Bonmui Chin USC section. Bonmui Ngin Motram Hai Mui Bay. The airline subjected you to different boarding procedures based on race. The evidence. The flag placed before your arrival. The seat reassignment from an agent workstation. The refusal to cite published policy. The police call. The NCIC query. The physical obstruction and the physical contact all occurred exclusively to you, the only black passenger in the first-class boarding line. Secondary federal claim, Bon Mui Hai USC section Mot Ngin Chin Trum Tam Mui Mot. The airline interfered with your right to make and enforce a contract, namely the purchase of a confirmed first-class ticket, by reassigning your seat, flagging your reservation, and physically preventing you from boarding. State claim, Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act, CRS Hai Mui Bongut Noi Ba Mui Bongut Noi Sautram Le Mot. The airline engaged in discriminatory practice in a place of public accommodation. Separate complaint against airport police. Referral to Denver International Airport Police Internal Affairs regarding Officer Nolan's unauthorized NCIC query. The CJIS security policy requires articulable criminal justice purpose for any NCIC access. The blank justification field on his query demonstrates the absence of such purpose. Sable studied the documents, read the legal citations, cross-referenced them against the evidence she'd assembled on the flight. Every fact in the complaint was sourced to a time-stamped entry in her notes app, a photograph on her phone, or a voice memo recorded at the scene. What about the 3 prior complaints? Referenced in the preservation letter, we don't have access to the sealed files, but we've cited the docket numbers and noted that the airline's pattern of gate stop complaints, followed by NDA settlements, is relevant to our claims. If this goes to discovery, we'll subpoena them. And the seat reassignment? That's our strongest evidence of premeditation. The share's system log will show the exact time, workstation, and agent ID for the modification. It was entered at 4:41 p.m., 6 minutes before you reach the gate. That timestamp destroys any claim of a system error or random audit. Someone deliberately reassigned your confirmed seat before you arrived, which created the irregularity that justified the stop. Lorraine paused, leaned back in her chair. There's one more thing. I made some calls over the weekend. Discreet calls. Turns out, the DOT's Aviation Consumer Protection Division has been quietly compiling discrimination complaints against this airline for the past 14 months. We're not the first. We're not the 10th. But we may be the best documented. The implications settled in the room like a change in air pressure. If the DOT was already investigating, Sable's complaint wouldn't land on an empty desk. It would land on a desk that already had a stack of files and a preliminary conclusion, and it would add weight to whatever the government was already building. When do we file? Today. The DOT complaint goes electronic. The state complaint goes to the Civil Rights Division by courier. The preservation letter goes to the airline's registered agent and their CLO by certified mail with return receipt. She paused. And I've also prepared a separate cease and desist from the firm's outside litigation team, addressed to the airline's CLO, demanding that any future settlement discussions regarding your case exclude a non-disclosure provision. They'll push back on that. Of course they will. NDAs are how they keep the pattern invisible. 3 prior complaints, 3 NDAs, 3 silenced women. That's not a legal strategy. That's an infrastructure of suppression. Sable signed the filings. 3 signatures. 3 different documents. 3 separate avenues of accountability, each traveling through a different branch of the system, each designed to reach a different audience, each carrying the same core evidence: a confirmed ticket, a stolen seat, a blocked jet bridge, and 25 minutes that should never have happened. Lorraine gathered the folders, paused at the door. One more thing. Dennis Yu called our office this morning. The name didn't register immediately. Sable looked up. The videographer at Gate B49, 26 years old, Korean-American. He was traveling to New York for a wedding shoot and saw the whole thing. He recorded 27 minutes of continuous footage from his seat across the concourse. Sable's hands went still on the conference table. He got the whole thing? The stop. The conversation with Stroud. Holloway's arm across the jet bridge. Your voice memo dictation. Nolan walking to his patrol car. Holloway grabbing your bag strap. Even Margot Langford's comments and her deleting her own recording as she walked back down the jet bridge. All of it. Wide angle, continuous, cloud-backed. How did he find us? He searched the Keating deal press release when it went live this morning, recognized your name from the boarding pass Holloway had been holding, called our main office line and asked to speak with your legal team. The press release. Sable's name and photo, front page of the trade journals, exactly as Lorraine had predicted. The announcement that Vanguard Peak Capital had completed a $120 million acquisition under the leadership of Managing Director Sable Merritt. The kind of press release that made industry professionals nod and competitors take notice, and airline gate agents realize they'd made the worst decision of their careers. He hasn't posted the footage? No, he's been holding it. Wants to know if we want it for the case before he does anything with it. Bring him in, tomorrow if possible. I want to see the footage and I want our litigation team to authenticate it before anyone else touches it. Lorraine nodded and left. The conference room was silent. Downtown Denver hummed outside the glass walls. Traffic and construction and the ordinary machinery of a Monday morning, while inside, on the walnut table, 3 filed complaints sat in their folders like grenades with the pins pulled, waiting for the Postal Service to deliver them to their targets. Tuesday, Dennis Yu sat in the Vanguard Peak conference room with his laptop open and his phone connected to the wall-mounted screen. He was nervous, the kind of nervousness that comes from being 26 and sitting in a private equity firm's offices, surrounded by lawyers whose hourly rates exceeded his weekly freelance income. His hands kept adjusting the laptop angle, then readjusting it, the fidgeting of someone who knew the thing on his hard drive was important, but wasn't sure he was ready for how important. "Start from the beginning," Lorraine said. She had a legal pad in front of her and a court reporter seated in the corner, transcribing. Dennis pressed play. The footage was wide-angle, slightly shaky for the first few seconds as he positioned his phone, then stable, propped against his backpack, pointed at gate B47 from 40 feet away. The audio was faint but audible. The PA system, ambient conversation, the electronic chirp of boarding passes scanning. And at the center of the frame, clearly visible, was Sable Merritt, standing at the gate podium while Trent Holloway scanned her pass and the yellow flag appeared on his screen. They watched the full 27 minutes. Nobody spoke. The court reporter's fingers moved steadily. Lorraine made notes. Sable sat perfectly still, her hands flat on the conference table, watching herself be humiliated in high definition with the controlled focus of someone reviewing a financial model, looking for data points, not emotions. The footage captured everything. Holloway's initial stop, the way his body shifted from autopilot to alert the moment the yellow flag appeared, the way his eyes traveled from screen to passenger and made their assessment in under a second. Stroud's arrival with the manila folder, the rehearsed confidence, the handoff of the document, the visible deflation when Sable started reading instead of complying. The document exchange. Sable photographing both pages, Stroud's face cycling through surprise, irritation, and something that looked like the first tremor of concern. Nolan's arrival, walking directly to Sable, not to Holloway. The footage made this choice stark and undeniable. 2 people standing at a boarding gate, one in uniform behind the podium, one in a hoodie in front of it. And the armed officer walked to the one in the hoodie without a moment's hesitation. Without asking who called. Without asking what happened. The visual grammar of assumption, captured in 12 seconds of unbroken footage, Nolan taking her ID. And here the footage revealed something Sable had felt but couldn't prove from her own perspective, the wrist grab. Dennis's phone was 40 feet away, but the angle was nearly perfect, perpendicular to the interaction, capturing Nolan's hand reaching past the license and closing around Sable's wrist. The contact was brief, 2 seconds, but on screen, with the footage paused and zoomed, it was unmistakable. A police officer gripping a civilian's wrist during a non-criminal encounter, without consent, without justification, without the articulable threat that would have made physical contact legally defensible. "Pause it there," Lorraine said. She studied the frozen frame, Nolan's fingers wrapped around Sable's wrist, Sable's hand extended, holding the license itself visible between them, the object of the exchange that should have required nothing more than a handoff. "Can you enhance that?" Dennis zoomed. The image pixelated slightly at maximum zoom, but the contact was clear. Fingers on wrist, grip visible. Duration measurable by frame count, 47 frames at 30 frames per second. 1.57 seconds of unauthorized physical contact. They continued watching. Nolan walking to his patrol car, the 2-minute gap, measurable on the footage timer, while the NCIC query processed. His return, the handoff of the license, held at arm's length between 2 fingers, then the physical moments that would matter most in any courtroom. At timestamp 17 minutes, 41 seconds, Holloway stepping into the jet bridge entrance, planting his feet, extending his arm. The frame captured it perfectly. His body filling the doorway, his arm rigid across the opening, bicep locked, palm flat against the wall. And Sable standing 3 feet away, tote bag on her shoulder, phone in hand. The visual was unmistakable. Not a conversation, not a negotiation. A barrier. A wall of human authority placed between a ticketed passenger and her flight, maintained for 3 minutes and 22 seconds by the footage counter. At timestamp 22 minutes, 9 seconds. Holloway's hand closing around Sable's bag strap as she walked toward the jet bridge after being cleared. From Dennis's angle, the grab was devastating. The reaching motion, clearly initiated by Holloway, the grip on the leather strap, the backward pull that jerked Sable's shoulder and stopped her mid-stride. The bag swung. Sable's body rocked backward, then stillness. Her downward glance at the hand. The words, inaudible on the recording, but the lip movement was readable. Remove your hand. Holloway's fingers opening, the strap sliding free, and Sable walking through the jet bridge door with the rigidity of someone holding themselves together through force of will alone. Lorraine replayed the bag grab 3 times. Each replay, her pen moved faster across the legal pad. That's assault, she said quietly. Under Colorado revised statutes, muy tamget noi baget noi hai chum lebon, offensive physical contact without consent. It's a misdemeanor, but in the context of a federal discrimination complaint, it's evidence of escalation. He grabbed a passenger who'd been cleared to board, after being told by his own police officer that there was no criminal issue. There's no procedural justification for that contact. None. At timestamp 12 minutes, 16 seconds, Nolan reaching past the license and gripping Sable's wrist. From 40 feet, the gesture was clear. The extension of his hand beyond the card, the closing of fingers, the 2-second hold. The kind of contact that wouldn't register as violence in any police report but registered as dominance to anyone who watched it. At timestamp 15 minutes, 30 seconds, Margot Langford, in the boarding line behind Sable, leaning forward and speaking. The audio was too distant to catch the words, but the footage showed the reaction. Passengers nearby shifting, looking uncomfortable, one man laughing. Then Margot scanning through and looking back at Sable with an expression that the camera captured in profile. Satisfaction. Proprietary satisfaction. The look of someone who believed the world was correctly organized, and she was on the right side of the line. Then the final detail that neither Sable nor her legal team had known about until this moment. At timestamp 23 minutes, 2 seconds. Margot Langford reappearing at the jet bridge entrance after boarding, speaking to Sable. Then, this was the detail, pulling out her own phone, filming Sable for approximately 11 seconds, then lowering the phone and tapping the screen 3 times. She's deleting the video, Dennis said. I zoomed in on that section. She recorded Sable, then deleted the recording right there at the jet bridge. Why would she delete it? Lorraine asked. Because by that point, the district lead had cleared Sable to board. The narrative had shifted. Whatever Margot thought she was recording, some kind of vindication footage, proof that the system worked, had become evidence of her own participation. So she deleted it. But you have footage of her deleting it. Yes, ma'am. Lorraine made a note, underlined it twice. In litigation, the deletion of evidence was often more damaging than the evidence itself. It demonstrated consciousness of guilt, the awareness that what had been recorded was problematic, that the recording needed to disappear. Margot hadn't just participated in the humiliation, she'd tried to destroy the record of her participation, and Dennis Yu had captured the destruction. Sable watched her own 25 minutes play out on the conference room screen with the detached focus of someone reviewing a due diligence file. She noted details she'd missed in real time, the expressions of passengers behind her, the moment when the elderly man in the cardigan spoke to Holloway, the way Danica Villanueva had turned her face away from the scene every time Sable looked in her direction, and she noticed something she hadn't seen from the ground. At timestamp 4 minutes, 22 seconds, before Stroud arrived, before Nolan was called, a second gate agent at the far end of the counter, a woman with dark hair pulled back whose badge read Anand, had been watching the exchange between Sable and Holloway. At timestamp 6 minutes, the second agent had walked to a workstation, pulled up what appeared to be a reservation screen, frowned, and printed something. She'd held the printout for a moment, then placed it face down on her desk when Stroud emerged from operations. Priya Anand, the second gate agent who'd noticed the seat reassignment. I need to find her, Sable said. Already on it, Lorraine made another note. If she printed the reservation log showing the seat reassignment and the agent ID, that printout is evidence, and if she preserved it independently of the airline system, it's evidence they can't destroy. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. Dennis provided the raw footage files, original, unedited, with metadata intact showing the recording start time, device serial number, and GPS coordinates that confirmed he was at Gate B, Bon Mui Chin, at Denver International Airport, at the time the footage was captured. Lorraine's team would have a forensic specialist authenticate the files before they were submitted with the DOT complaint as a supplemental exhibit. Dennis stood to leave, paused at the door. "Miss Merritt, I want you to know, I didn't record this to get views or go viral. I recorded it because I've seen this happen before, to my mother, to my aunt, to people who don't look like what other people expect them to look like, and nobody ever has evidence. It's always just someone's word against the system." He paused. "You have evidence now." Sable looked at him, nodded, said nothing. Because what was there to say to a 26-year-old stranger who had done what 300 other passengers at Gate B47 had not? Who had witnessed injustice and preserved the proof instead of looking away? "Thank you, Dennis." He left. The conference room door closed. Lorraine began organizing the exhibits. "The NCIC query log," Sable said. "We need that. I've already filed a FOIA request with the Airport Police Department for all records related to Officer Nolan's activity on that date. The CJIS system maintains access logs that include the querying officer's badge number, the subject's name, the time of query, and, critically, the justification code. If that field is blank, it's documented in the federal system, and the airport PD can't alter it retroactively. How long for the FOIA response? Officially, 20 business days. In practice, they'll stall. But I've sent a parallel request directly to the DOJ's CJIS division, citing the ongoing DOT investigation and requesting preservation of all access logs. They'll have to respond. The machinery was in motion. 3 complaints filed, 1 forensic video authenticated, 1 FOIA request submitted, 1 preservation demand delivered. The kind of institutional accountability apparatus that moved slowly but ground fine. The legal equivalent of a glacier, invisible from a distance, but capable of reshaping landscapes over time. Share this right now with someone who needs to hear it. Because what happens next isn't just one woman's fight. It's about every silent settlement, every sealed NDA, every time someone was told the system worked when the system was the problem. Wednesday morning, 12 days after the incident, Sable received an email from the DOT's Aviation Consumer Protection Division. Subject line, Acknowledgement of Complaint. Case number DOT-ACE-2026-2047. The body of the email was bureaucratic and brief. Your complaint has been received and assigned to an investigator. The carrier has been notified and given 30 days to respond. You will be contacted if additional information is needed. Standard language, standard timeline. But the case number was real, and the assignment was real, and somewhere in Washington, an investigator was opening a file with Sable Merritt's name on it, adding it to whatever stack already existed for this airline at this airport. The same morning, Lorraine received a response to the preservation demand letter. It came not from the airline's chief legal officer, but from Henderson, Pratt & Cole, the outside counsel, the NDA specialists, the firm that had buried 3 prior complaints with mid-5-figure checks and confidentiality agreements. The letter was 4 paragraphs of careful language. The airline takes all customer complaints seriously. An internal review is underway. All relevant records are being preserved consistent with the airline's standard retention policies. The airline looks forward to resolving this matter in a manner satisfactory to all parties. Lorraine read the letter aloud to Sable in the conference room. Translation, Lorraine said. They're terrified. They're preserving records because they have to, reviewing internally because the DOT is watching, and already thinking about settlement terms because that's what Henderson Pratt does. They settle. It's their entire business model. Will they contact me directly? They'll try, through back channels first. A call from someone who isn't officially involved, but just wants to understand the situation. Then a formal outreach with settlement language, mid-six figures, NDA, a promise to review gate procedures, cookie-cutter resolution designed to make this go away before it becomes expensive. And if I say no, then it becomes expensive. Lorraine set the letter down. For them. Day 19 brought the first crack in the airline's containment strategy. The DOT investigator, a woman named Mara Solis, 12 years in the Aviation Consumer Protection Division, called Lorraine's office and requested the supplemental video evidence. She'd reviewed the initial complaint and the documentation, and had identified the case as potentially relevant to an ongoing pattern or practice inquiry. Pattern or practice, the legal phrase that transformed individual complaints into systemic investigations. The phrase that meant the government wasn't just looking at what happened to Sable Merritt on one Friday afternoon, it was looking at what happened to everyone who looked like Sable Merritt at every gate at every airport served by this airline. Lorraine submitted the authenticated footage, 27 minutes. Every frame time-stamped, GPS verified, forensically sealed. She included a cover letter referencing the 3 prior NDA-sealed complaints and noting that the airline's use of confidential settlements to suppress a documented pattern of discriminatory gate stops warranted particular scrutiny by the division. Day 19 also brought news about Officer Bryce Nolan. The Airport Police Internal Affairs Unit had opened a formal review of his NCIC query. The review was triggered by the FOIA request, standard bureaucratic cause and effect, where requesting records forced the department to actually look at the records, and looking at the records revealed what anyone who'd been paying attention already knew. The justification field was blank. No articulable suspicion. No criminal justice purpose. Just a man running a woman's name through a federal criminal database because she was black and standing at a gate, and someone in a blazer had told him there was a problem. Nolan remained on active duty during the review. His union representative released a statement. Officer Nolan followed standard operating procedures appropriate to the circumstances of the call. We are confident the review will confirm that his actions were consistent with department policy and applicable law. The statement was designed to sound reassuring. To Lorraine, it sounded like a preview of a defense that wouldn't survive the NCIC access log. Standard operating procedure didn't include blank justification fields. Applicable law didn't include warrantless database searches of people who hadn't been accused of any crime. The union could say whatever it wanted. The log said what it said. Day 26 brought Priya Anand. She called Lorraine's office on a Saturday morning, which was unusual. She spoke quickly and quietly, the rushed cadence of someone on a break, checking over her shoulder between sentences, and what she said changed the trajectory of the entire case. I'm a gate agent at DEN. I was working B-47 on the day this happened. I saw the seat reassignment in the system, and I printed the log before anyone could alter it. I still have the printout. It's in my car, in an envelope, under the spare tire. The level of precaution told Lorraine everything she needed to know about the environment inside the airline's Denver operation. Priya wasn't hiding evidence from investigators. She was hiding it from her employer. The printout showed exactly what the shares system had recorded. Seat Ba reassigned from Merritt, Sable to Langford, Margot at 4:41 p.m. Workstation DEN Gatnoy, B Bombay Gatnoy Honghai. Agent ID, D Gatnoy Villanueva. Override reason. Agent discretion, fair class audit. But Priya had something else. Something the system log didn't capture. Something that existed only because she'd been standing close enough to hear and had the conscience to remember, and the courage, weeks later, to pick up a phone and say it out loud. About 10 minutes before the reassignment, I heard Danica take a call at her workstation. She had her headset on, so I couldn't hear the other side. But I heard her say, "Yes, ma'am, I can move her. Which seat do you want?" Then she typed for about 30 seconds, checked something on her screen, and hung up. She looked, I don't know how to describe it. She looked like it wasn't the first time she'd done this, like it was routine. Did she seem uncomfortable? No, that's what bothered me. She was smiling, same smile she always has, like it was normal, like moving a confirmed passenger off their assigned seat on someone's phone instruction was just part of the job. Do you know who called her? No, but the call came through the airline's internal line. Extension numbers show on the headset display, and I could see the prefix. It was a 700 series extension. Those are assigned to district-level management, not gate operations, not customer service. Management. Could it have been Margot Langford? Passengers don't have access to our internal lines. This was someone inside the company, someone with the authority to make Danica say, "Yes, ma'am," without hesitating, and someone who knew which flight, which seat, and which passenger to move. Priya paused. I've worked this gate for 3 years. I've seen this happen before. Not every week, but enough. Enough that some of us know the pattern. A manual flag gets entered, a passenger gets stopped. Someone gets an upgrade they didn't request, and nobody talks about it afterward. How many times? At least 6 that I've personally witnessed. Maybe more that I didn't notice because I wasn't paying attention. It's always the same type of passenger who gets flagged, and it's always a different type of passenger who gets the seat. The implication was devastating. If the seat reassignment hadn't been Danica's independent decision, if she'd been instructed by someone in management through an internal phone line, then the premeditation extended beyond one junior gate agent. It reached into the airline's supervisory structure. It suggested that the practice of flagging certain passengers and reassigning their seats wasn't a rogue action but an informal, unwritten, and systematically deniable protocol, carried out through internal channels, executed by junior staff who understood the instruction without needing it spelled out, protected by the absence of any written policy that acknowledged its existence. The unsigned memo Stroud had shown Sable at the gate suddenly made a different kind of sense. It wasn't incompetence, it was architecture. A document vague enough to justify any individual stop, undocumented enough to deny any systemic pattern, and disposable enough to disavow if someone actually read it. Lorraine took Priya's statement under oath, notarized, with the court reporter present. She asked Priya to preserve the printed log and any other documentation from that shift, schedules, internal communications, headset call logs if accessible. She asked if Priya was willing to testify. Priya hesitated. The hesitation lasted 11 seconds. Lorraine counted, the way litigators count silences, because the length of a silence tells you how much someone is risking by breaking it. "They'll retaliate," Priya said. "They'll change my schedule, move me to a different concourse, find reasons to write me up until I quit or get fired. I've seen it happen to other people who raised concerns." Retaliation against a witness in a federal discrimination proceeding is itself a federal violation under 49 U.S.C. Section 4127D. If they touch your schedule, your assignments, your evaluations, your employment status, anything, we file a separate complaint and the DOT adds it to the pattern. And if they just make my life miserable in ways I can't document, the cold shoulders, the shift changes, the suddenly unavailable parking spots, the performance reviews that go from exceeds expectations to meets expectations without explanation. Lorraine looked at Priya with the honest directness that made her effective in depositions and trusted by clients. "I won't pretend there's no risk. There's always risk when you challenge institutions from the inside. The system protects itself first, and the people who expose its failures second. But there's also risk in staying silent. The risk that the next woman who gets stopped at that gate doesn't have anyone who saw what happened, and the airline adds another NDA to its collection, and nothing changes, and you go home knowing you had the evidence, and the opportunity, and the conscience to act, and you didn't." Priya was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached into her bag, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and placed it on the conference table. The printout, time-stamped, dated, showing every detail of the seat reassignment from Workstation D, En Gach, Noi B, Bombay Gach Noi, Konghai. "Where do I sign?" Priya signed the statement. Day 30 brought the airline's first settlement attempt. Not through Henderson, Pratt & Cole. Through a different channel. A senior vice president of customer experience who called Lorraine's office and introduced himself as someone who just wanted to have an informal conversation about finding a resolution. The informality was studied, practiced. The kind of casual outreach that created no paper trail and committed no resources and could be denied later if the conversation went sideways. The VP's name was Russell Falk, and his voice carried the smooth, calibrated warmth of someone who'd been trained in crisis communications. "We've completed our initial internal review," Falk said, "and I want you to know that we take Ms. Merritt's experience very seriously. We've identified several procedural gaps that contributed to the situation, and we're implementing corrective measures immediately." "What corrective measures specifically?" "Enhanced training for gate agents on fair class audit procedures, updated protocols for police notification, a review of our reservation system's manual override policies." "And what about the individuals involved? Agent Holloway has been placed on paid administrative leave pending the completion of our internal investigation. That's standard procedure." "Paid leave isn't a consequence, Mr. Falk. It's a vacation with paperwork. It's our process. We have contractual obligations to our employees that require due process before—" "Your contractual obligations to your employees don't override your legal obligations to your passengers. What about Agent Villanueva, the compliance supervisor, the officer?" "Agent Villanueva has voluntarily separated from the airline. I can't comment on the reasons for her departure, but I can confirm she is no longer employed with us." Voluntarily separated. The corporate euphemism for a resignation that wasn't entirely voluntary. A quiet exit, negotiated behind closed doors, designed to remove a liability without creating a lawsuit. Danica Villanueva was gone. Her workstation was someone else's now. And whatever she knew about who had called her at 4:35 p.m. and instructed her to move Sable Merritt's seat, that knowledge had walked out the door with her. "And what resolution are you proposing?" Lorraine asked. Falk cleared his throat, the sound of a man transitioning from empathy to commerce. "We'd like to offer Ms. Merritt a comprehensive resolution package, financial compensation in the mid-six-figure range, specifically $750,000. A formal written apology from our CEO, signed and delivered personally. Lifetime diamond status with the airline, including companion privileges, and a corporate commitment to implement the procedural changes I described, including mandatory retraining for all gate personnel at Denver International within 60 days. The number hung in the air. $750,000, a sum that would have been life-changing for most people. A sum thought for Sable Merritt, whose annual compensation at Vanguard Peak was a multiple of that figure, represented something other than money. It represented the airline's calculation of what her silence was worth, what the inconvenience of her dignity cost, priced to the nearest thousand, approved by a board committee, allocated from a budget line item labeled Passenger Relations, Dispute Resolution. "And an NDA," Lorraine said. Not a question. A statement of the thing they both knew was coming. A beat of silence. The kind of silence that sounds like a man choosing between two scripts. Confidentiality provisions are standard in these types of resolutions. They protect both parties, the airline from reputational harm and Ms. Merritt from public scrutiny related to the terms. "Mr. Falk, our position on NDAs has been communicated clearly in our cease and desist letter. Ms. Merritt will not sign a non-disclosure agreement, not for $750,000, not for $7.5 million. The confidentiality infrastructure that your airline has used to suppress 3 prior discrimination complaints at Denver International is not a legal strategy. It's a pattern of obstruction, and we will not participate in extending it." "I understand your position, but surely there's a way to—" "There isn't. The NDA is off the table, permanently. If that's a deal breaker for your team, we're happy to proceed through the DOT investigation and, if necessary, federal litigation. We have authenticated video evidence, a sworn witness statement, NCIC access logs with blank justification fields, a reservation modification log showing premeditated seat reassignment, and an internal memo produced as policy that has no legal authority. We are comfortable with our evidentiary position." The line went quiet. Sable, listening on speakerphone, could hear Falk breathing. The shallow, rapid breathing of a man who had expected this call to last 15 minutes and end with a tentative agreement, and was now realizing it was going to end with nothing. "I'll take this back to our team," Falk said finally. "But I want to note that the airline's offer is genuine, and we believe a negotiated resolution serves everyone's interests better than protracted litigation. One more thing, Mr. Falk. The internal phone call. I'm sorry? Our witness observed Agent Villanueva receive an internal call at approximately 4:35 p.m., 6 minutes before the seat reassignment. We have a sworn statement to that effect. If your internal review identified who made that call, we'd appreciate that information. If it didn't, if your review somehow missed a 6-minute gap between an internal instruction and a manual override that triggered a 25-minute detention, then we'll raise that omission with the DOT. The line went dead. Not a hang-up. A disconnection. The kind that happens when someone pulls the phone away from their ear and needs a moment before continuing. We'll look into that, Falk said finally. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. He hung up. Lorraine set the phone down and looked at Sable, who'd been listening on speakerphone from across the conference table. They didn't know about the phone call, Sable said. No, they didn't. Which means their internal review was either incompetent or deliberately narrow. Either way, they've now been notified, and any failure to investigate from this point forward is willful. Day 45. The airline's formal settlement offer arrived by certified letter. 8 pages. $750,000. No NDA. That concession had been made, reluctantly, after Lorraine's refusal became clear. But the offer included a mutual non-disparagement clause that would prevent Sable from publicly discussing the incident in terms that could damage the airline's reputation. Lorraine read the clause aloud. Non-disparagement is NDA's cousin. Different dress, same function. If you can't publicly discuss the incident, you can't testify in other passengers' cases, can't speak to media, can't participate in the DOT's investigation as a cooperating witness. Sable read the offer, set it down, looked out the conference room window at the front range, the mountains catching morning light, the city spread below them like a circuit board. Counter, she said. Same amount. Remove the non-disparagement clause. Add a requirement that the airline disclose the total number of gate stop complaints filed at DEN in the past 36 months, broken down by race, and add a requirement that the airline's internal investigation findings, including the identity of the person who instructed Danica Villanueva to reassign my seat, be provided to the DOT as part of their ongoing review. They'll reject the disclosure requirement. I know. And the investigation findings demand will terrify them. I know. Lorraine smiled. The smile of a litigator who understood that the purpose of a counteroffer wasn't always to settle. Sometimes the purpose was to define the terms of the fight, to tell the other side exactly how much you knew and how far you were willing to go, and to let them decide whether they wanted to find out what happened next. Day 53. The airline rejected the counteroffer. The letter from Henderson, Pratt, and Cole was 6 pages of carefully structured language, explaining that the disclosure and investigation requirements exceeded the scope of individual resolution, and that the airline remained committed to addressing Ms. Merritt's experience through appropriate channels. Translation: We won't show you how deep this goes. Sable had expected the rejection, had planned for it. The counteroffer had been a diagnostic, not a negotiation, a way to confirm that the airline was protecting something larger than one incident, hiding something more systemic than one bad gate agent. She authorized Lorraine to notify the DOT investigator that settlement discussions had stalled, and that the airline had refused to disclose gate stop complaint data or internal investigation findings. The notification was factual, brief, and devastating in its implication. The airline was choosing opacity over resolution, which told the government everything it needed to know about what that opacity was concealing. Day 60. Dennis Yu's footage went public. Not because Dennis chose to release it, because a journalist found him. Her name was Camille Archer, and she covered aviation consumer rights for a national outlet. She'd been tracking the DOT's pattern or practice inquiry through FOIA requests and industry sources, and she'd learned about Sable's complaint through a public records request to the Colorado Civil Rights Division, where complaints, unlike sealed federal settlement dockets, were a matter of public record. Archer contacted Dennis through his freelance website. Dennis contacted Lorraine. Lorraine contacted Sable. And Sable, after 48 hours of deliberation, after weighing privacy against impact, silence against change, comfort against conscience, authorized the release. The footage went live on a Thursday evening. 27 minutes, edited to 14 for the initial story, but available in full on the outlet's website. The headline read, "First-class ticket, second-class treatment. Video shows black executive detained at Denver airport gate." 340,000 views in the first 48 hours. By the end of the week, it had crossed 1 million. The comments section, that digital coliseum where strangers judged strangers, split along predictable lines. Half the responses expressed outrage. The other half performed the ritual of defending the indefensible. She should have just complied. It's random screening. It happens to everyone. Why is everything about race? If she'd just shown her ID and waited, none of this would have happened. The deflection chorus, singing the same song they always sang, mistaking the lyrics for logic. But the video didn't need commentary to make its argument. It made its argument in visual grammar that transcended debate. A woman standing alone, a man blocking a door, a police officer walking to the wrong person, a hand closing around a wrist, a strap yanked backward, and 300 people watching without moving. The footage spoke in a language older than English and more fluent than law, the language of power observed, documented, and made undeniable. The airline released a statement within 6 hours of publication. It was written by Henderson, Pratt & Cole's crisis communications team and approved by the CEO's office. 3 paragraphs, carefully balanced between acknowledgement and self-defense. The first paragraph expressed deep concern about Miss Merritt's experience. The second described immediate steps to review boarding procedures and gate agent training protocols. The third noted that the airline does not tolerate discrimination in any form and is cooperating fully with all regulatory inquiries. Not an apology, an expression of concern. The difference was legal, not linguistic. Apologies implied fault. Concern implied awareness. Henderson Pratt knew the difference the way carpenters know the difference between nails and screws. The Airport Police Union responded separately. A 1-paragraph statement defending Officer Nolan's actions as consistent with standard practice for gate incident response and expressing confidence that the Internal Affairs Review would confirm appropriate conduct. The statement did not address the blank NCIC justification field. It did not address the wrist grab. It did not address why Nolan had walked to Sable instead of to the gate agent who'd called for assistance. The story included the boarding pass screenshots, the photographs of Stroud's unsigned memo, a statement from Lorraine on behalf of Vanguard Peak Capital confirming Sable's position and the Keating acquisition, and a detail that Camille Archer had uncovered independently. Trent Holloway had been the subject of 2 prior passenger complaints in the previous 18 months, both involving boarding delays of minority passengers, both resolved through the airline's internal grievance process with no disciplinary action. The complaints weren't public. Archer had obtained them through a source inside the airline, someone who, like Priya Anand, had watched the pattern and decided the pattern deserved a witness. The airline's stock dipped 1.2% on Friday morning. Not catastrophic, not ruinous, but visible. The kind of dip that made board members ask questions over email, that triggered conference calls between the CEO and the investor relations team. That turned a customer service incident into a fiduciary concern. In the arithmetic of publicly traded companies, where every percentage point represented millions in market capitalization, 1.2% was the cost of 25 minutes at Gate B47. Sable saw the stock price on her Bloomberg terminal and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, nothing. Because the stock would recover, it always did, and the airline would issue its statement and implement its training, and the news cycle would move on to the next outrage, and the fundamental architecture of the system would remain intact, waiting for the next Sable Merritt to walk up to the next Gate B Bombay wearing the wrong hoodie, unless the DOT investigation went deep enough, unless the pattern was documented broadly enough, unless enough people refused to sign the NDA. Unless. The following Monday, Camille Archer's inbox held 12 new emails. 4 were from passengers, all women of color, who described similar experiences at Denver International Airport gates. 2 of them had signed NDAs and were consulting attorneys about whether speaking to a journalist constituted a violation. 2 had never filed complaints at all, believing nothing could be done, believing the system was too large and too indifferent to notice one person's afternoon. All four recognized the pattern immediately when they watched the footage. The unsigned policy memo, the fair class audit flag, the police call, the physical obstruction, the settlement offer, the NDA. "It's the same script," one of the women told Archer in an off-the-record phone call. "The same words, the same sequence, like they're running a playbook." They were. They had been for years. But playbooks only work when they stay on the sideline, when they enter the public record, when a 26-year-old videographer captures them in 27 minutes of authenticated footage. They stop being strategies and start being evidence. Go ahead and share this story with everyone you know. Because the next part isn't just about what happened to one woman, it's about what's been happening for years. And the lights are finally on. Day 75. The DOT's Aviation Consumer Protection Division issued a formal notice of investigation to the airline, citing a pattern of consumer complaints alleging discriminatory treatment during boarding procedures at Denver International Airport. The notice required the airline to produce 3 years of gate stop records, internal audit documents, complaint files, settlement agreements, and employee communications related to fair class verification procedures. The notice was not public, but its effects were immediate. The airline's stock dropped another 2% on the day the notice was rumored in aviation industry circles. Henderson, Pratt, and Cole assigned a 12-person team to manage the response, and Trent Holloway's paid administrative leave was extended indefinitely while the airline's legal team assessed his exposure. Keith Stroud was quietly reassigned from compliance supervision to a desk role in the airline's training department. No public announcement, no admission of wrongdoing. Just a lateral move that removed him from passenger-facing operations and buried him in a department where unsigned memos were standard practice and nobody asked questions. Officer Bryce Nolan's internal affairs review concluded on day 82. The finding, the NCIC query, lacked documented justification, constituting a violation of CJIS Security Policy Section Numchum Mochum Bay and Departmental Policy regarding database access. The recommended discipline, a formal written reprimand, mandatory retraining on CJIS compliance, and a 6-month probationary period during which all database queries would be subject to supervisory review. Not a suspension, not a termination, a written reprimand and a training course. The institutional equivalent of being told, "Don't do it again," with the implicit understanding that doing it again would result in being told, "Don't do it again, again." Nolan's union called the outcome appropriate and proportional. The union president appeared on a local news segment to say that Nolan was a dedicated officer who responded to a call from an airline employee and performed his duties in accordance with the information he was given. He did not mention the blank justification field. He did not mention the wrist grab. He did not mention the 14 seconds it had taken to search a woman's name through a criminal database while she stood at an airport gate with a valid ticket and a tote bag full of closing documents worth 9 figures. Lorraine called the outcome predictable. The system investigating itself and finding that the system had mostly behaved correctly. The eternal internal affairs conclusion, as reliable as gravity and twice as depressing. Sable called it the beginning, not the end, because the NCIC access log was now part of the DOT's investigative file, and federal investigators operated under different standards than airport police IA units. What was a reprimand at the department level could become a termination condition under a federal consent decree. And consent decrees, unlike written reprimands, lasted for years and came with federal monitors who didn't owe anyone a favor. Day 85 brought an unexpected development. Margot Langford's attorney contacted Henderson, Pratt, and Cole, not the airline but the airline's counsel, requesting clarification on whether Ms. Langford was considered a party, a witness, or a subject in the ongoing proceedings. The request revealed something the legal team hadn't anticipated. Margot was lawyering up, not because she'd been charged with anything, but because the footage had made her recognizable, and the recognition had consequences. Her employer, a regional wealth management firm, had received calls from clients asking whether the woman in the video was the same Margot Langford who managed their portfolios. Some of the clients were black. Some were not. All of them were uncomfortable with what they'd seen. The performative cruelty, the whispered comments, the deleted recording, the smile. The firm had not terminated Margot, but they'd removed her from client-facing duties pending an internal review. She was, in the corporate language that masked ugliness with process, on administrative reassignment. Lorraine received this information secondhand through professional networks that connected law firms like underground rivers connecting wells. She shared it with Sable without commentary. Sable said nothing for a long moment. Then, she deleted the video because she knew. Knew what? That what she'd done looked exactly like what it was. You don't delete something unless you know it's evidence. She wasn't embarrassed. She was self-preserving. Do you want to pursue anything against her individually? No, she's not the system. She's a symptom. And symptoms don't change when you treat them individually. You have to change the conditions that produce them. Lorraine nodded, said nothing, made a note on her legal pad, and moved on. Day 90. Sable sat in her office on the 24th floor, looking at the mountains. On her desk, the Keating deal tombstone, the acrylic block that private equity firms commission to commemorate completed transactions, with the deal name, the amount, and the date etched in clear plastic. $120 million, reduced to a paperweight. Next to it, a printed copy of the DOT complaint. Case number DOT gạch nôi A, CE gạch nôi 202 gạch nôi 0417, 12 pages. 13 time-stamped evidence entries. 27 minutes of authenticated video. 1 sworn witness statement. 3 prior sealed complaints referenced. A pattern documented. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unsaved number. Ms. Merritt, I was on your flight. I sat 3 rows back. I should have said something when you boarded. I should have said something at the gate. I'm sorry I didn't. She stared at the message. Didn't reply. Didn't delete it. Put the phone face down on the desk. Another text from Lorraine. DOT investigation estimated timeline. Chin muito mot trum tam mui additional days. Airlines outside counsel requesting extension to produce documents. Standard delay tactic. We're opposing. And a third text from Camille Archer. 4 more complaints received since the story aired. 2 from Den, 2 from the airline's hub in Atlanta. 1 passenger has documentation similar to yours. Time-stamped, photographed. She's willing to talk on record. The pattern expanding, becoming visible. Not just one gate at one airport on one afternoon, but a network of identical interactions at identical gates, executed with identical tactics, suppressed with identical NDAs, and invisible until someone had refused to sign the agreement that made it disappear. Sable typed a reply to Lorraine. Oppose the extension. They've had 30 days. 3 years of records don't take 90 more. To Camille Archer, connect her with our legal team, same terms. No NDA, full cooperation with DOT. To the unsaved number, she typed 4 words. Deleted them. Typed 2 different words. Deleted those. Sat for a moment with the cursor blinking in an empty text field. The way cursors blink in empty fields. Patient, indifferent, waiting for someone to decide what to say. She thought about the woman who'd mouthed, "Are you okay?" at the gate, and then looked away. She thought about the elderly man in the cardigan who'd spoken to Holloway and then walked through the jet bridge because that was as far as his courage reached. She thought about the 300 passengers who'd watched, and not one, had stepped forward to say, "This isn't right." Not even the text message stranger who was apologizing now, 2 months later, from the safety of an unsaved number. She understood the silence. She did. Fear was rational. Self-preservation was natural. The calculus of intervention, the weighing of personal risk against someone else's injustice, was a math problem most people solved in favor of themselves, and she couldn't blame them for the arithmetic. She'd done it too, in other situations, in other moments, choosing quiet when quiet was safer. But understanding didn't make it less lonely, didn't make the memory of standing at that gate, alone, with an arm across the door and 300 silent witnesses, any lighter to carry. She typed, "It's not too late." Sent. Wondered if she believed it. Decided it didn't matter whether she believed it. What mattered was that she'd said it, that she'd offered the one thing she'd wished someone had offered her at gate B47, the possibility that the next moment could be different from the last one. Her phone buzzed again. Dennis Yu. Ms. Merritt, FYI, a journalist in Atlanta contacted me. Says she has 2 more passengers with similar stories at the airline's hub there. She's writing a longer piece, asked if my footage could be included, wanted your team's okay first. Sable forwarded the message to Lorraine with a single word. Yes. The pattern was expanding. Not because Sable was expanding it, but because the pattern had always been this large, sprawling across airports and gates and concourses and years, and the only thing that had kept it invisible was the silence of the people it touched. Break the silence in one place, and it broke in others. Pull one thread and the fabric shifted. She wasn't pulling the thread for revenge. She wasn't pulling it for money or fame or the satisfaction of watching people who'd humiliated her face consequences. She was pulling it because someone had to, and because she could, and because the tote bag sitting under her desk still contained a 312-page document proving she'd earned every seat she'd ever occupied. And that proof shouldn't have been necessary. That was the thing. That was the heart of it. Proof of belonging shouldn't be a condition of being left alone, but it was, and until it wasn't, she would keep documenting, keep filing, keep refusing to sign, keep sitting in rooms where people expected her to be grateful for settlements designed to buy her silence and call it resolution. The office hummed around her. The Keating deal was generating its first quarterly returns. The board was pleased. The partners were already discussing the next acquisition target. Normal business, normal rhythms, the machinery of capital doing what it always did, growing, compounding, building value from assets that other people had underestimated. The way Trent Holloway had underestimated the woman in the hoodie. The way Keith Stroud had underestimated the woman who read his fake memo. The way Bryce Nolan had underestimated the woman whose wrist he'd grabbed and whose name he'd run through a criminal database. The way Danica Villanueva had underestimated the woman whose seat she'd stolen with 6 keystrokes at 4:41 p.m. The way Margot Langford had underestimated the woman she'd dismissed with a sigh and a comment about tickets people can't actually use. They had all looked at Sable Merritt and seen the hoodie, the sneakers, the tired eyes, the brown skin. They had run their calculations and reached their conclusions and acted on assumptions so deeply embedded in their behavior that they probably couldn't identify them as assumptions at all. They'd just acted. Naturally. Instinctively. The way systems act when they have been built to produce a specific result and nobody's ever forced them to examine the blueprint. Sable wasn't going to fix the blueprint. She wasn't naive enough to believe that one complaint, one video, one investigation would transform an industry built on moving people through spaces as efficiently as possible, where efficiency often meant processing certain people differently than others and trusting that they wouldn't document the difference. But she could make the blueprint visible, could force the people who drew it to defend it in public, under oath, with evidence on the table and cameras in the room, could ensure that the next time an airline's legal team opened a settlement folder, they'd find Sable Merritt's name and remember that not everyone signed. That was enough. Not justice. Not the kind that resolved cleanly and left everyone satisfied and wrapped the story in a bow. But enough. Enough to matter. Enough to shift the calculation. Enough to make someone, somewhere, think twice before extending an arm across a jet bridge and telling a woman with a valid ticket that she wasn't boarding this flight. She closed the DOT complaint file, opened the Keating deal report. Monday continued. Outside the window, Denver spread beneath the mountains. 5 million people moving through their days, boarding planes, and checking into lounges and scanning passes and walking through doors that opened for them without question. The system working the way it always worked, for most of them, without friction, without delay, without the 25 minutes that separated Sable Merritt's experience from everyone else's at Gate B47. The investigation would take months. The airline would stall, produce documents slowly, challenge subpoenas, and hire crisis consultants. Henderson, Pratt, and Cole would earn millions in billable hours defending a pattern they'd helped build. Nolan would complete his retraining and return to airport patrol with a written reprimand in his file, and no change in his behavior that anyone would notice. Margot Langford would continue flying first class, diamond medallion status intact. The deleted video gone from her phone, but not from Dennis Yu's footage or the federal evidence file. And somewhere in the airline's training department, in a windowless office on the third floor of the corporate headquarters, Keith Stroud sat at a desk that didn't face any passengers. His new title was Training Content Developer, Gate Operations. The title was a demotion wrapped in neutral language, a lateral move that had all the characteristics of punishment without any of the accountability, no disciplinary record, no admission by the airline that his actions at Gate B47 had been improper, just a reassignment that removed him from any position where he might hand a passenger an unsigned document and be asked to defend it. His current project was a Gate Equity and Inclusion Training Module, mandated by the airline's internal review, required for completion by all Gate personnel within 90 days, presented to the DOT as evidence of corrective action. He'd been working on it for 3 weeks. The module included diversity awareness scenarios, de-escalation language guides, a section on implicit bias adapted from a corporate consulting firm's off-the-shelf curriculum, and a signature page confirming completion. It did not include any revision to the Fair Class audit procedure. It did not address the reservation system's manual override function. It did not explain who had authority to instruct junior agents to reassign confirmed passengers' seats. It did not acknowledge that the unsigned memo he'd shown Sable Merritt at the gate had ever existed. And the document itself, the training module that Keith Stroud was drafting as evidence of the airline's commitment to change, carried no revision date, no compliance deadline, no enforcement mechanism, no regulatory citation, no accountability structure for agents who completed the training and then continued doing exactly what they'd always done. Just like the memo he'd handed Sable at the gate. Some things change, some things just get better disguises, and some systems survive not by resisting reform, but by absorbing it, by creating the appearance of change without altering any of the conditions that made change necessary. But the case file stayed open. Case number DOT Gach Noi. ACE Gach Noi Hai Kong Hai. Sao Get Noi Kong Bon Bon Mot Bay. Sable Merritt versus a system that thought she would sign the NDA and go away. She didn't go away. She didn't go. And somewhere on her phone, in a folder labeled Travel Docs, between the passport photo and the TSA pre-check confirmation and the screenshot of the contract of carriage, a new file sat. 27 minutes of footage, time-stamped and authenticated, showing exactly what happened when someone decided that a hoodie and brown skin were evidence enough to block a jet bridge and call the police and run a criminal database, check and steal a seat and grab a bag and humiliate a woman in front of 300 strangers. 27 minutes that the airline wished didn't exist. But they did, and they weren't going anywhere.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. If you found the content helpful, please remember to like and subscribe so you won't miss our upcoming episodes. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment below. We are always here to listen.